A woman everyone believed was dead steps off a stagecoach in a torn wedding dress. Her husband thinks she abandoned him and their baby 4 years ago. The truth? She was kidnapped, locked in an asylum, and married off by force. Now she has 1 week to prove she didn't run, before the men who stole her life come to finish what they started. Stay with me until the very end of this story. You won't believe how it unfolds. And comment below with your city so I can see how far Nora's story travels across the world. The stagecoach rattled into Ashford Hollow just as the November sun began its descent behind the western ridge, painting the prairie sky in shades of amber and blood. The wheels kicked up dust that hung in the cold air like a warning, and the few townspeople on Main Street stopped mid-step, their conversations dying on their lips. Because the woman who stepped down from that coach looked like a ghost. She wore what had once been a wedding gown, ivory silk now torn at the hem, stained with mud and God knew what else. Her dark hair, once carefully pinned, now fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her feet were wrapped in strips of cloth that had long since given up being shoes. But it was her eyes that truly stopped hearts. Those green eyes that hadn't seen kindness in 4 years. That had memorized every crack in a ceiling she'd been forced to stare at. That had wept themselves dry and then learned to weep again. Nora Ellington had come home, or rather, Nora Ashford, though she doubted anyone in this town would call her that now. She stood there on the weathered planks of the coach stop, her legs trembling from exhaustion and fear, and the sheer impossible fact that she was finally here. The driver was already hauling luggage down for the other passengers, a merchant and his wife, who were staring at Nora like she'd crawled out of a grave. But Nora had no luggage. She had nothing but the ruined dress on her back and a heart that was beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Sweet, merciful Jesus," someone whispered. "Is that—" "Can't be." "But it looks like—" "Nora Ashford's been gone 4 years. She ran off. Left her baby and didn't look back." Broke Reed's heart into pieces. The whispers slithered through the small crowd gathering on the street, and Nora felt each word like a lash. She'd known it would be like this. She'd had 4 years to imagine this moment, locked in that room with its barred windows and its smell of carbolic acid and despair. 4 years to know that when she finally escaped, if she escaped, no one would believe her. But she hadn't come back for the town's belief. She'd come back for her son. "Nora?" The voice came from behind her, and Nora's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice. She'd heard it in her dreams every night for 4 years. She'd whispered to it in the dark, pretending he could hear her, pretending he knew she hadn't left him, hadn't abandoned their child, hadn't chosen to vanish the night after their son was born. She turned slowly, afraid that if she moved too fast the moment would shatter and she'd wake up back in that room, back in that nightmare. Reed Ashford stood 10 feet away. He'd changed. 4 years had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before, lines around his mouth, between his brows. His dark hair was longer, touching his collar. He'd been 26 when she'd last seen him. Now he looked older, harder, like something inside him had calcified into stone. He wore work clothes, denim and a worn leather vest, dusty boots, and his hands were clenched at his sides. But it was his eyes that nearly broke her. Those blue eyes that had once looked at her like she'd hung the moon and stars now looked at her like she was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. An enemy. "Reed," she whispered. Her voice cracked on his name. "What are you doing here?" 4 words, flat, cold, each one a door slamming shut. Nora felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of the entire town. "I came back. 4 years, Reed said, and now there was something dangerous in his voice, something raw. 4 years, Nora, and now you just— What? Decided you missed the place?" "Reed, please. I can explain—" "Explain?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You left the night after Caleb was born. You left a note that said you couldn't do it, couldn't be a mother, couldn't be a wife. You walked out of that house while our son was sleeping and you never looked back." "That's not—" Nora's voice broke. "I didn't write that note. Reed, I didn't— I found it in your handwriting, Nora. It wasn't me. They forged it. They—" She took a step toward him, desperate, and he took a step back. The movement, that instinctive retreat, hurt more than anything else could have. "Reed, please, just listen." "Papa?" The small voice cut through everything else like a knife. Nora's heart stopped. A little boy stood beside Reed. Not beside him, really, but slightly behind him, one small hand clutching Reed's leg. He was 4 years old. 4. The same age as the hole in Nora's chest, the same age as the years she'd lost. Caleb, her son. He had Reed's dark hair and her green eyes, and he was beautiful. He was wearing a child-sized work shirt and little boots, and his face was smudged with dirt like he'd been playing outside, and Nora couldn't breathe. She couldn't breathe because the last time she'd seen him, he'd been hours old, red-faced and squalling in her arms, and she'd kissed his forehead and whispered, "I love you. I love you. I'll keep you safe." And then she'd closed her eyes for just a moment. And when she'd opened them again, she'd been somewhere else. "Who's that, Papa?" Caleb asked, staring at Nora with open curiosity. Reed's jaw tightened. He put his hand on Caleb's shoulder, protective, possessive, and Nora saw the war happening behind his eyes. Whatever else he felt, whatever anger or betrayal or hurt, he was a father first. He wouldn't let his pain touch his son. "Nobody, Caleb," Reed said quietly. "Come on, we need to get home before dark." "But Papa." "Now, son." Reed turned away, his hand still on Caleb's shoulder, guiding him down the street toward where their wagon was hitched. And Nora couldn't let them leave. "His favorite color is blue," she called out, her voice cracking with desperation. He was born at dawn, right as the sun came up, and he didn't cry at first. He just looked around like he was trying to figure out where he was, and I remember thinking he was the bravest thing I'd ever seen. Reed stopped walking. "I sang to him," Nora continued, tears streaming down her face now, her voice shaking. "I only had a few hours, but I sang to him, 'Hush, little baby,' over and over, and I promised him I would always come back no matter what." "Mama used to sing that song to me?" Caleb's voice was small, confused. Reed's shoulders were rigid, his back still to Nora. When he spoke, his voice was so low she almost couldn't hear it. "You don't remember your mama, Caleb." "But you said—" "What I said was your mama left." Reed's voice hardened. "And that's what happened. Come on." They started walking again, and Nora stood there in her ruined wedding dress, watching them disappear down the dusty street. Around her, the townspeople were still whispering, still staring, but she didn't care anymore. She'd come back. After 4 years of hell, after escape and running and fear, she'd come back. And Reed didn't believe her. "You can't give up," she told herself fiercely, even as her legs threatened to give out. "You didn't survive 4 years in that place to give up now." "You got somewhere to stay, miss?" Nora turned. An older woman stood a few feet away, gray hair, kind eyes, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Nora recognized her after a moment. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house on the edge of town. No, Nora admitted. "Come on, then." Mrs. Henderson gestured down the street. "I've got a room. It's not much, but it's clean." "I don't have any money." "Didn't ask if you did." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were sharp but not unkind. "You look half dead on your feet, girl. Whatever your story is, you need a bed and a meal before you tell it." Nora wanted to refuse, wanted to run after Reed and Caleb, wanted to make Reed listen, but she knew it would be useless. Reed was hurt and angry, and she looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. She needed time. She needed to be clean, to be fed, to be human again. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Henderson just nodded and started walking. Nora followed, aware of every eye on her back, every whisper that followed her down the street. One step at a time, she told herself. You found them. That's the first step. Now you just have to make Reed believe you. But as she followed Mrs. Henderson toward the boarding house, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the November wind. Somewhere behind her, in the shadows between buildings, she felt eyes watching. Different eyes. Dangerous eyes. They'd come looking for her. She knew they would. She just had to reach Reed before they reached her. Beds. The boarding house room was small and sparse. A bed, a washstand, a single window overlooking the alley, but to Nora, it felt like a palace. Mrs. Henderson brought up a basin of warm water, a bar of soap, and a plain cotton dress that had seen better days but was clean and whole. "Take your time," the older woman said. "I'll bring up some supper in an hour." Alone, Nora stripped off the wedding dress that had become her prison uniform, her escape clothes, her armor. She washed herself carefully, wincing at the bruises that still mottled her arms, the two sharp angles of her collarbones and ribs. 4 years of asylum food and fear had whittled her down to sinew and bone. But she was still here, still alive, still fighting. She pulled on the cotton dress. It hung loose on her frame, but it was clean and soft, and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. Now that she was alone, now that the adrenaline was fading, everything was catching up with her. The escape. The 3-day journey on foot and then by coach. The moment she'd seen Reed and Caleb, Reed's face, God, his face, the betrayal in his eyes. He thinks I left him. The thought made her want to scream. She'd spent 4 years imagining their reunion, imagining Reed's relief, his joy, his arms around her. She'd been so stupid. Of course he wouldn't believe her. Why would he? Everyone thought she'd run away. The note they'd forged in her handwriting, how had they done that? She still didn't know, had convinced everyone that she'd abandoned her family. But I didn't. I didn't. I didn't. I didn't. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Henderson entered with a tray, soup, bread, and weak tea. "Eat," she commanded, setting the tray on the small table. "You look like you haven't had a decent meal in months." "Years," Nora corrected quietly. Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment. "You want to tell me what really happened? You'd believe me?" "Don't know till I hear it." Nora picked up the spoon, her hand trembling. "The night after Caleb was born, I went to bed. Reed was watching the baby. I was exhausted. The birth had been long and difficult. I remember closing my eyes, and then..." She swallowed hard. "Then I woke up somewhere else. A room with white walls and bars on the windows. They told me I'd had a breakdown, that I'd tried to hurt myself, that I was being kept for my own protection." "Who told you this?" "The doctors, the nurses. The man who said he was my new husband." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. "You're what?" "They married me off, Mrs. Henderson, to a man named Lucian Braddock, a wealthy railroad baron who wanted a wife and didn't care that I already had a husband, a child, a life." Nora's voice broke. My father arranged it. He owed Lucian money, and Lucian wanted me, so they just took me. Drugged me, forged a note in my handwriting, told everyone I'd run away. And they kept me locked up for 4 years. Dear God, I escaped 3 weeks ago. I walked for 2 days before I found a town with a stagecoach. I had nothing, no money, no shoes, but I knew if I could just get back here, if I could just see Reed and Caleb again, I could make them understand. Tears were streaming down Nora's face now. But he doesn't believe me. Reed thinks I abandoned them. Mrs. Henderson sat down heavily on the bed beside her. That's quite a story, girl. You don't believe me either." "I didn't say that." The older woman's voice was gentle. "I said it's quite a story. But I saw your face when you looked at that little boy. I saw Reed's face too. There's history there, pain and love all tangled up. That's not something you can fake." "Then you'll help me? I'll give you a place to stay and food to eat," Mrs. Henderson said carefully. "Beyond that, you need to talk to Reed, really talk to him. And you need proof, girl. Without proof, it's your word against everyone's memories." "I know." Nora wiped her eyes. "But I had to come back. Even if no one believes me, even if Reed never forgives me, I had to try. Caleb deserves to know his mother didn't abandon him." Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "Eat your soup. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you start fighting for your family." After the older woman left, Nora forced herself to eat, though the food tasted like ash in her mouth. She was exhausted, bone deep, soul deep, exhausted. But when she lay down, sleep wouldn't come. She kept seeing Reed's face, Caleb's confused eyes, the way Reed had stepped back from her like she was dangerous. She'd survived 4 years in hell, She'd escaped. She'd made it home. But the hardest part was just beginning. The next morning, Nora woke before dawn, her heart pounding. For a moment, one terrible, disorienting moment, she thought she was back in the asylum, back in that white room with its locked door and barred windows. But then she heard the sounds of the boarding house waking up around her, smelled bread baking somewhere below, and remembered, I'm free. I'm home. I'm close to Caleb. She dressed quickly in the borrowed cotton dress and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen, pulling fresh loaves from the oven. You're up early, the older woman observed. I need to see Reed. Where's his ranch? About 3 miles north of town, but Nora, I know he doesn't want to see me. I know he probably won't even let me on his property, but I have to try. Nora's voice was steady, determined. I spent 4 years locked away. I'm not going to waste a single day now that I'm free. Mrs. Henderson studied her for a moment, then nodded. There's a horse in the stable out back. Old mare named Daisy. You can borrow her. But Nora? Reed Ashford's not the same man you left behind. 4 years of thinking you abandoned him and your son. It changed him, made him harder. Don't expect miracles. I'm not expecting miracles, Nora said quietly. I'm just expecting a chance. The ride north took longer than she'd anticipated. Daisy was indeed old and in no particular hurry, but Nora didn't mind. It gave her time to think, to rehearse what she'd say, to prepare herself for Reed's anger. The Ashford Ranch appeared as the sun crested the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose. It was bigger than Nora remembered. More fences, a new barn, additional corrals. Reed had been building something, building a life, without her. She dismounted at the gate, her legs shaking. The house sat at the end of a long dirt drive, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. It looked warm, lived in, like a home. Nora had taken 3 steps toward the house when the front door opened and Reed stepped out, a rifle in his hands. That's far enough, he called out. Nora stopped, her hands raised slightly. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then why are you here? Reed descended the porch steps, the rifle held loosely but ready. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly, the exhaustion in his face, the wariness in his eyes. I thought I made myself clear yesterday. You did, but I came back anyway. Nora took a careful breath. Reed, I know you don't believe me. I know what you think happened, but I'm asking you, begging you, to give me a chance to explain. I don't need explanations. I need you to leave. No. Reed's eyes narrowed. No? I didn't come back to make your life difficult, Reed. I came back for my son. For our son. And I'm not leaving until you hear the truth. The truth? The truth is, you walked out. I didn't. The words exploded out of Nora, raw and desperate. I didn't walk out, Reed. They took me. They drugged me, and they took me, and they locked me away, and I have been trying, fighting, to get back to you and Caleb every single day for 4 years. Reed just stared at her, his jaw tight. The night after Caleb was born, I went to bed, Nora continued, her voice shaking. I was so tired. The birth had been hard and I was exhausted, but I was happy. So happy. I remember looking at you holding Caleb and thinking, this is everything I've ever wanted. And then I closed my eyes to rest, and when I woke up, her voice broke. When I woke up, I was in a white room with bars on the windows, and men in suits were telling me I'd had a mental breakdown, that I was dangerous, that I needed to be kept away from my family for everyone's safety. That's insane, Reed said flatly. Yes, it was. It is. But it happened. Nora took a step closer, and Reed tensed, but didn't back away. My father owed money to a man named Lucian Braddock, a railroad baron with more money than God, and a taste for collecting things he shouldn't have. Lucien decided he wanted me for a wife, and my father sold me to him like I was cattle. They forged a note in my handwriting, made everyone believe I'd run away, and they kept me locked in a private asylum for 4 years while Lucien told everyone I was his delicate, troubled wife who needed peace and quiet. Reed's face was unreadable. If that's true, why didn't you escape sooner? Because I tried, Reed. Tears were streaming down Nora's face now. I tried a dozen times, every time they caught me, every time they put me in a worse room, watched me more closely, drugged me more heavily. I almost gave up. I almost let myself disappear into that place. But then I'd remember Caleb, remember his tiny hand wrapped around my finger, remember promising him I'd always come back. And I'd keep fighting. She wiped her eyes angrily. 3 weeks ago, there was a fire in the East Wing. In the confusion, I got out, I ran, I stole clothes from a washing line. I walked until my feet bled, and I didn't stop until I got here. To you. To my family. Reed was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. You really expect me to believe this? I don't expect anything. I'm just telling you the truth. The truth? Reed laughed bitterly. The truth is I spent 4 years wondering what I did wrong, what I could have said or done differently to make you stay. The truth is Caleb has grown up without a mother, and every time he asks about you, I have to tell him you didn't want us. The truth is... Papa? They both turned. Caleb stood on the porch in his nightshirt, his hair sleep-mussed, his eyes wide. Caleb, go back inside, Reed said immediately. But Papa, who's that lady? Is she the one from yesterday? Reed hesitated, and Nora seized the moment. My name is Nora, she called out gently. And yes, I was in town yesterday. Are you staying? Caleb asked. No, Reed interrupted firmly. Miss Nora was just leaving. But I like her, Caleb said with the straightforward honesty of a 4-year-old. She has nice eyes, like mine. Nora's heart cracked open. You have very nice eyes, she told him softly. Reed made a frustrated sound and lowered the rifle, leaning it against the porch railing. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Nora remembered, a gesture that meant he was struggling with something, and then looked at her with exhausted, wary eyes. 1 week, he said finally. Nora blinked. What? 1 week. You want a chance to prove you're telling the truth? You've got 7 days. Reed's voice was hard. You can stay here at the ranch. There's a spare room in the barn that's been converted for hands, and you can help with the work. But you don't go near Caleb without my say-so. You don't make promises you can't keep. And at the end of 7 days, if I'm not convinced, you leave and you don't come back. Understood? It wasn't trust. It wasn't even belief. But it was a chance. Understood, Nora whispered. Good. Reed turned toward the house. Caleb, inside. Now. But Papa. Now, son. Caleb disappeared inside and Reed looked back at Nora. The barn's around back. There's a pump for water and I'll bring food out at mealtimes. Stay away from the house unless I tell you otherwise. Reed? 7 days, Nora. Don't waste them. He went inside and closed the door firmly behind him, leaving Nora standing in the yard as the sun climbed higher and the prairie wind carried the smell of hay and livestock and home. 1 week. 7 days to prove she was telling the truth. 7 days to earn back a life that had been stolen from her. 7 days to make Reed believe. She could do this. She had to do this. For Caleb. For Reed. For the family she'd never stopped fighting to return to. Nora picked up Daisy's reins and led the old mare around to the back of the property, where a sturdy red barn stood alongside several corrals. The spare room Reed had mentioned turned out to be a small tack room that had been fitted with a cot, a chair, and a wood stove. It was clean and dry, and after 4 years in the asylum, it felt like luxury. She was unpacking her meager belongings, which consisted of exactly nothing, when she heard footsteps outside. A moment later, Reed appeared in the doorway with a bundle of blankets and a pillow. Nights get cold, he said shortly, setting them on the cot. Thank you. He nodded and turned to leave, but Nora couldn't let him go without trying once more. Reed? He stopped but didn't turn around. I know you don't believe me yet. I know I have to earn your trust, but I want you to know, her voice caught, I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought I'd never see you again, even when I thought I'd die in that place, I never stopped loving you or Caleb. You two were the reason I survived. Reed's shoulders tensed. For a moment, Nora thought he might say something, might turn around, might soften, even a fraction, but then he simply walked away, his boots crunching on the gravel. Nora sat down on the cot and let herself cry. Not desperate tears, not hopeless tears, but tears of release. She was here. After 4 years of hell, she was finally, impossibly here. Close enough to hear Caleb's voice, close enough to see Reed's face, close enough to fight for everything that had been taken from her. 1 week. She'd make every moment count. The first full day at the ranch began before dawn. Nora woke to the sound of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle, and for a moment, just a moment, she felt peace. No locked doors, no bars on windows, no nurses watching her every move. She dressed quickly in the cotton dress Mrs. Henderson had given her, wishing desperately for work clothes, and ventured out into the cool morning air. The ranch was already alive with activity, hands moving between corrals, smoke rising from the main house, the sound of hammering from somewhere near the new barn. Reed was in the main corral working with a young horse that was clearly not interested in being worked with. He saw Nora approaching and his expression hardened, but he didn't send her away. "You know anything about horses?" he asked without preamble. "I used to." "Fine. Go help Jake muck out the stalls. He's in the stable, brown building past the barn." It wasn't a friendly assignment, but it was work. Nora made her way to the stable where she found Jake, a grizzled cowhand in his 50s, already hard at work. "You the woman from town?" he asked, leaning on his pitchfork. "I'm Nora." Jake studied her for a moment, his weathered face unreadable. "Boss says you're helping out for a bit." "That's right." "You ever mucked a stall before?" "Yes." "Good. There's a pitchfork in the corner. Work your way down the line. We've got 12 horses and they all need fresh bedding." It was hard, dirty work, exactly the kind of work that made her muscles scream and her hands blister, but Nora attacked it with a kind of fierce joy. Every forkful of soiled hay, every armload of fresh straw was proof that she was here, that she was real, that she was fighting for her family. By midday, her back was screaming and her hands were raw, but she'd cleaned 8 stalls. Jake brought her a dipper of water and a hard look. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he observed. "I'm fine." "You're swaying on your feet." "I said I'm fine." Nora wiped sweat from her forehead. "I can finish the rest before supper." Jake was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Reed's a good man. Best boss I've ever had. 4 years ago, when you left, it nearly destroyed him. He had a newborn son and a ranch to run and a heart that was broken into pieces. I watched him put himself back together through sheer stubbornness and love for that little boy. So whatever your story is, whatever you're here to prove, you better be damn sure it's the truth. Because if you hurt him again, you'll have more than just Reed to answer to." "I understand," Nora said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt him in the first place." Jake nodded slowly. "Finish up here, then go get some food. Boss left a plate for you on the porch." The plate turned out to be simple fare: bread, cheese, and an apple, but Nora ate it like it was a feast. She was sitting on the porch steps, exhausted and filthy, when she heard the sound of childish laughter coming from the field behind the house. She couldn't help herself. She followed the sound. Caleb was in the field with Reed, trying to fly a kite that kept diving into the grass. Reed was patient, showing him how to hold the string, how to read the wind. And Caleb was laughing, pure, joyful, childish laughter. And Nora felt her heart break and mend simultaneously. This is what I missed. 4 years of this. "Did you finish your work?" Reed's voice was sharp, pulling her from her thoughts. He'd spotted her standing at the edge of the field. "Yes," Nora said. I was just—" "Papa, can the lady help us?" Caleb called out, oblivious to the tension. "No, son. Miss Nora has other things to do." "But I'm not good at the kite," Caleb protested. "Maybe she knows how." Reed looked torn, caught between his desire to keep Caleb away from Nora and his son's natural curiosity. Finally, he said stiffly, 5 minutes, that's all." Nora approached carefully, aware of Reed's watchful eyes. Caleb handed her the kite string with absolute trust, and Nora had to blink back tears. "The trick," she said gently, kneeling beside him, "is to let the wind do most of the work. You just hold steady and guide it." She helped him launch the kite, and this time it caught the wind properly, soaring up into the blue prairie sky. Caleb's face lit up with pure delight. "I did it! Papa, look!" "I see it, son." Reed's voice was softer now, watching his boy. "You're doing real good." They flew the kite together for the promised 5 minutes. Nora and Caleb side by side, Reed standing a few feet away. It was the closest Nora had been to her son since the night he was born, and she memorized everything. The way his nose crinkled when he smiled, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the way he smelled like soap and sunshine and little boy. When the 5 minutes were up, Reed called Caleb back to the house. But before he left, Caleb turned to Nora with a shy smile. "Thank you for helping me," he said solemnly. "Any time," Nora whispered. That night, lying on the cot in the tack room, Nora allowed herself to hope. It was just a sliver of hope, fragile and tentative, but it was there. Reed had given her a week. Caleb had smiled at her. She was here, she was close, and she was fighting. She just had to keep fighting and hope that a week would be enough. Boy. The days fell into a rhythm. Nora rose before dawn, worked until her body screamed for mercy, and collapsed on the cot after dark. She mucked stalls, mended fences, hauled water, carried hay. Her hands blistered and bled and formed calluses. Her muscles burned and ached and slowly grew stronger. And all the while, she watched. She watched Reed with Caleb, saw the gentle patience, the fierce protectiveness, the love that shone in every interaction. She watched Reed with his ranch hands, saw the fair leadership, the hard work, the respect he'd earned. She watched Reed alone in those rare, quiet moments, saw the exhaustion, the loneliness, the wound that hadn't healed. By the third day, Reed had stopped watching her quite so closely. By the fourth day, he'd given her more responsibilities, helping with the horses, checking the irrigation for the winter wheat, even cooking meals for the ranch hands. And on the fifth day, something shifted. Nora was in the kitchen garden behind the house, pulling weeds from the frost-bitten vegetable beds, when she heard Caleb crying. She was on her feet instantly, following the sound to the side of the house, where Caleb sat on the ground holding his knee. "What happened?" Nora asked, kneeling beside him. "I fell," Caleb sobbed. "And Papa's in town and it hurts." Blood was seeping through his torn trouser leg. Without thinking, Nora scooped him up and carried him into the house, breaking Reed's rule about staying away from the house. But she didn't care. Caleb was hurt. She set him on the kitchen table and gently rolled up his trouser leg. The cut wasn't deep, but it was dirty. She found clean water, cloth, and salve in the cupboard, her hands moving with remembered practice, mother's instinct taking over, and cleaned the wound carefully while Caleb sniffled. "You're very brave," she told him softly. "This must hurt quite a bit." "I'm trying not to cry," Caleb said, his lip trembling. "Papa says big boys don't cry." "Papa's wrong." Nora met his eyes gently. "Everyone cries sometimes, even big boys, even papas. Crying doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human." "Did you cry when you were away?" Caleb asked with a child's innocent directness. Nora's hand stilled. "Yes, I cried a lot." "Why were you away?" "Because bad people took me somewhere I didn't want to be, and I tried very hard to come back to come home." Caleb was silent for a moment, watching as Nora carefully bandaged his knee. Then he said quietly, "Papa cried sometimes. When I was little. I heard him at night." Nora's eyes burned with tears. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Are you really my mama?" The question hung in the air between them. Nora looked at this little boy, this perfect, beautiful child, and knew she had to tell him the truth. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm your mama. Why did you leave me?" "I didn't." "Well," Nora's voice broke. "I promise you, Caleb, I didn't leave you. I would never, ever leave you. Bad people took me away, but I fought every single day to come back to you." Caleb studied her with those green eyes, her eyes, and then, devastating in its simplicity, he reached out and took her hand. "I'm glad you came back." Nora pulled him into a hug, careful of his injured knee, and let herself cry. Caleb wrapped his small arms around her neck and held on tight, and Nora thought, This is what I was fighting for. This moment right here. That's how Reed found them when he returned from town. Nora and Caleb wrapped around each other at the kitchen table, both of them crying. "What the hell is going on?" Reed's voice was sharp with alarm. "Papa!" Caleb pulled back from Nora, wiping his eyes. "I fell and hurt my knee, and Miss Nora fixed it." Reed's eyes went from Caleb's bandaged knee to Nora's tear-stained face. You were supposed to stay away from the house. He was hurt, Nora said quietly. And you weren't here. What was I supposed to do? Reed opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he just said, Caleb, go wash up for supper. But Papa. Now, son. After Caleb left, Reed rounded on Nora. You can't do this. Do what? Care for my injured son? He's not... Reed stopped himself. You can't confuse him. He was just starting to accept that you're gone, and now you're back and you're telling him you're his mother. Because I am his mother, Reed. You left him. No, I didn't. Nora was on her feet now, facing him. How many times do I have to say it? I didn't leave. They took me. They drugged me, and they took me, and they locked me away, and I spent 4 years in hell trying to get back to you. Then prove it, Reed shouted back. Give me something, anything, that proves what you're saying is true. What do you want from me, Reed? I escaped with nothing. I had no time to grab papers or documents or... Nora stopped, her mind racing. Wait, the asylum. It was called Riverside Haven. It's outside of Newton City, about 100 miles east of here. And Lucian Braddock, the man who held me there, he has an office in Newton. If you want proof, that's where you'll find it. Reed stared at her, his jaw working. Newton's 3 days' ride. I know. And you expect me to just leave my ranch, leave my son, and ride out there on nothing but your word? No, Nora said quietly. I expect you to look at me. Really look at me, Reed, and decide whether you think I'm lying. Reed did look at her. His blue eyes swept over her face, searching for something, truth, lies, she didn't know. And Nora looked back, letting him see everything. The pain, the desperation, the love that had never died. Finally, Reed said, I'll think about it. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't refusal either. He left the kitchen without another word, and Nora sank back into her chair, exhausted and shaking. But through the window, she could see Caleb in his room upstairs, pressing his hand against the glass. She pressed her hand back, and for the first time in 4 years, Nora let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was going to win this fight. The evening was settling into twilight when Nora heard horses approaching the ranch. Not just one or two, several. Her entire body went cold. Through the window of the tack room, she saw them. 5 riders, well-dressed, well-armed, led by a man she would recognize anywhere, Lucian Braddock. He'd found her. Nora's first instinct was to run. 4 years of captivity had taught her that survival meant staying invisible, staying away from the men who owned the keys to her cage. But then she thought of Caleb upstairs in the house, of Reed somewhere on the property, and she knew she couldn't run. Not this time. Running would bring Lucien's attention to this place, to these people, to her family. She had to face him. She stepped out of the tack room just as the riders came to a halt in front of the main house. Lucy Braddock dismounted with the practiced ease of a man who'd never done a day's hard work in his life. All his labor was done by money and intimidation. He was tall, silver-haired, handsome in the way a snake is handsome, and he wore a suit that cost more than most families made in a year. His eyes found Nora immediately, and his smile was a knife wrapped in silk. There you are, darling, he said pleasantly, as if she were a wayward child who'd missed dinner. You've led us on quite a chase. Reed emerged from the barn at that moment, and Nora saw his hand move instinctively toward the pistol at his hip when he took in the scene. 5 armed men, Nora standing rigid with fear, and Lucian Braddock looking at her with possessive satisfaction. Can I help you, gentlemen? Reed's voice was carefully neutral, but Nora could hear the steel underneath. Indeed you can. Lucian turned his attention to Reed with a condescending smile. I'm Lucien Braddock, and I'm here to collect my wife. Reed's eyes cut to Nora, and she saw the question there, the doubt, the confusion, the beginning of belief mixing with betrayal. Your wife? I'm not his wife, Nora said, her voice shaking but clear. The marriage was forced. It's not legal. Now, darling, Lucian said, pulling a folded document from his jacket. Let's not have another episode. Mr. Ashford, my wife suffers from delusions brought on by nervous hysteria. She's escaped from Riverside Haven, where she's been receiving treatment for the past 4 years. I have all the legal documentation right here. Marriage certificate, commitment papers signed by her father, medical reports from 3 separate doctors. He held out the papers to Reed, who took them slowly, his face unreadable. Nora watched him scan the documents, watched his expression shift from skepticism to confusion to something that looked horribly like resignation, and her heart cracked. "These look legitimate," Reed said quietly. "Of course they're legitimate," Lucian replied smoothly. "I'm a respectable businessman, Mr. Ashford. I love my wife, and I only want to bring her home where she can receive proper care." "They're forgeries!" Nora's voice rose with desperation. "Reed, you can't believe him. He paid doctors to declare me insane. He paid my father to sign away my rights." "You see?" Lucian spread his hands regretfully. "The delusions. It's really quite sad. She's convinced herself of this elaborate fantasy to escape the reality of her condition." "What condition exactly?" Reed asked, his voice still carefully neutral. "Nervous hysteria brought on by the trauma of childbirth," Lucian said, glancing at Nora with false sympathy. "After her first child was born, from a previous marriage that ended tragically, she had a complete mental collapse. Her father brought her to me for help, and I fell in love with her during her recovery. We married 3 years ago, but she has these episodes, you see, where she forgets her current life and believes she's still with her first husband. It's heartbreaking, really." It was brilliant, Nora realized with sick horror. Lucian had woven truth and lies together so seamlessly that anyone looking at those papers, hearing his reasonable tone, would believe him over her. She looked like exactly what he claimed, a wild, desperate woman in borrowed clothes, making outrageous accusations. "Reed," she said, forcing herself to speak calmly, despite the panic clawing at her throat. "Ask him about the asylum. Ask him why a woman with nervous hysteria needs to be kept behind locked doors and bars on the windows. Ask him why I have scars on my wrists from restraints." Lucian's smile tightened fractionally. "The restraints were for her own safety after she attempted self-harm. I never harmed myself. You restrained me because I kept trying to escape." "You see how agitated she becomes?" Lucian addressed Reed, as if Nora weren't even there. "This is exactly why she needs professional care. Mr. Ashford, I understand this must be confusing for you, but I have legal custody of my wife. I'm asking you, one gentleman to another, to help me get her into the carriage so we can return her to proper care." Reed looked at Nora, and she saw the war in his eyes. Part of him wanted to believe her. She could see it, that flicker of doubt about Lucian's too smooth story. But the papers in his hand, the official seals, the reasonableness of Lucian's tone, all of it was working against her. "Show him your wrist," Reed said suddenly. Nora blinked. "What?" "You said you have scars. Show him. Show all of us." Hope flared in Nora's chest. She pulled up her sleeves, revealing the white scars that circled both wrists, like bracelets. Evidence of 4 years of restraints, of fighting, of desperate attempts to free herself. Lucian barely glanced at them. "As I said, from the restraints necessary to prevent self-harm." "Those aren't self-harm scars," Reed interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but now it held an edge. "I've seen self-harm scars. I've seen restraint scars too, from when we had to rope a ranch hand who went mad from fever. Those scars are from someone fighting to get free. Mr. Ashford, and another thing." Reed took a step forward, positioning himself between Nora and Lucian. "If she's your wife, and she's been in your care for 4 years, why is she half-starved? Why does she look like she hasn't had a decent meal in months? That's not the look of someone receiving proper care." Lucian's pleasant mask slipped, revealing something cold and dangerous underneath. "You're interfering in a legal matter, Mr. Ashford. I strongly suggest—" "I'm not interfering in anything," Reed said flatly. "But I'm not going to let you drag a woman off my property against her will without more than some papers that might be forged and a story that doesn't add up." "The papers are not forged." Lucian's voice hardened. "And I have every legal right." "Then you won't mind waiting while I send word to Judge Crane in town," Reed countered. "He can verify the documents, and if they're legitimate, I'll help you load Mrs. Braddock into your carriage myself. But until then, she stays here." The two men stared at each other, and Nora could see Lucian calculating, weighing his options, deciding whether to push harder or retreat temporarily. Around them, His 4 men had their hands near their weapons, and Nora saw Jake and 2 other ranch hands emerge from the barn, also armed. "You're making a mistake," Lucian said softly. "I have connections, Mr. Ashford, powerful connections. If you harbor my wife against her legal guardian's wishes, I'm not harboring anyone. I'm asking you to wait while the law sorts this out." Reed's voice was calm but immovable. "Unless you have something to hide." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lucien smiled that terrible, cold smile and remounted his horse. "Very well. I'll return with Judge Crane and the county sheriff, but I want it noted that you're holding my wife here against my explicit wishes and against legal documentation." He looked at Nora, and his eyes promised punishment. "I'll see you soon, darling, and when I do, we'll have a long talk about your behavior." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. They disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust, and Nora felt her legs give out. She would have fallen if Reed hadn't caught her. "Easy," he said, his arm around her waist. "Easy now." "He's going to come back," Nora whispered, trembling. "He's going to bring the sheriff and the judge. And those papers, Reed, those papers look real because he has enough money to make anything look real. I know." "You believe me?" She looked up at him, hardly daring to hope. Reed was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes searching her face. "I don't know what I believe yet. But those scars on your wrists, the way you looked at him, that was real fear, Nora. And the story he told had holes in it big enough to drive a wagon through. So I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt until we can get to the truth. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was more than she'd had 5 minutes ago." "Thank you," she breathed. "Don't thank me yet. If those papers are legitimate, they're not. But if they are," Reed continued firmly, "I can't keep you here against the law. You understand that?" "I understand." Nora straightened, pulling away from his supporting arm even though she was still shaking. "But Reed, you have to understand something too. If he takes me back to that place, I will die there. Maybe not right away, but eventually. And I will never ever see Caleb again." Reed's jaw tightened. He looked toward the house where Caleb's face was pressed against the upstairs window, watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. "Go inside," Reed said quietly. "Keep away from the windows. I need to talk to Jake and the other hands. Make sure we're ready if Braddock comes back with trouble." "Reed." "Inside, Nora, please." She went, though every instinct screamed at her to run, to take Daisy and ride as far and as fast as she could before Lucian returned. But she'd spent 4 years running and hiding and fighting, and she was tired. So tired. And more than that, she couldn't leave Caleb. Not now, not when he'd finally started to accept her, to trust her. She found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table with his arms wrapped around himself. "Are you going away again?" he asked in a small voice. Nora knelt in front of him, taking his small hands in hers. "I'm going to try very hard not to." "That man said you're his wife." "He's lying, sweetheart. I'm not his wife. I never wanted to be." "But he has papers. Papa said the papers look real." "Papers can lie too," Nora said gently. "Just like people can. But I want you to know something, Caleb. No matter what happens, no matter where I am, I will always be your mama. Always. And I will always love you more than anything in this world." Caleb's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to go." "I don't want to go either." Nora pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "But sometimes bad things happen to good people, and we have to be brave. Can you be brave with me?" He nodded against her shoulder, and Nora closed her eyes, memorizing the feeling of holding her son, just in case. No, she couldn't think like that. She had to believe that somehow, some way, the truth would come out. Reed came in an hour later, his face grim. "Jake's riding to town to get Judge Crane. He should be back by morning. And if the judge sides with Lucian? Then we deal with that when it happens." Reed pulled out a chair and sat heavily. "Tell me everything about this place. Riverside Haven? What did it look like? How many people worked there? What did they do to you?" So Nora told him. She told him about waking up in that white room, about the nurses who administered drugs to keep her compliant, about the doctors who documented her delusions and episodes. She told him about Lucian's visits, how he'd sit in a chair across from her bed and talk to her like she was a thing he owned, How he'd tell her about the life they'd have together once she recovered. How he'd shown her forged photographs of their wedding and their honeymoon. She told him about the other women in the asylum, women whose families had committed them for being too independent, too difficult, too inconvenient. She told him about the bars on the windows, the locks on the doors, the restraints they used when anyone fought back. And she told him about her escape. There was a fire, she said, her voice distant with memory. In the East Wing, one of the other patients, a woman named Margaret, she'd been saving matches, hiding them in her mattress. She set it ablaze one night, and in the confusion, I ran. The nurses were trying to evacuate patients. The doctors were trying to save their records. And I ran. I stole a dress from a washing line at a house a mile away, stole bread from a baker's cart, and I walked. For 2 days I walked, staying off the roads, hiding when I heard horses. And then I found a town with a stagecoach, and She stopped, her throat tight. I stole money from a church poor box. I'm not proud of it, but I had to get home. Reed was quiet for a long moment. How did they drug you that first night? The night they took you? I don't know. Something in my water, maybe? Or maybe they used chloroform when I was already asleep. All I know is I went to bed in our house, and I woke up in hell. And your father? My father. Nora's voice turned bitter. He's the one who arranged it all. He owed Lucian money, gambling debts, and when he couldn't pay, Lucian offered him a deal. Clear the debt in exchange for me. My father always did value money more than family. Where is he now? Dead, as far as I know. Lucien mentioned it once, said my father had drunk himself to death within a year of selling me. I felt nothing when I heard it. Is that terrible? No, Reed said quietly. It's human. They sat in silence for a while, and then Caleb appeared in the doorway in his nightshirt, rubbing his eyes. Can't sleep, he mumbled. Reed opened his arms, and Caleb climbed into his lap, resting his head against his father's chest. Reed held him close, one hand stroking his dark hair, and Nora felt her heart break all over again at the sight of them. Her family, right here, and still somehow out of reach. Tell me a story, Papa, Caleb said sleepily. I'm not much good at stories, son. Miss Nora can tell one. Caleb looked at Nora with those green eyes. Will you? Nora glanced at Reed, who gave a slight nod. Permission. All right, she said softly. Once upon a time, there was a brave little boy who lived on a ranch with his papa, and the little boy's mama had to go away on a very long journey, not because she wanted to, but because bad people made her. But every single night, even though she was far away, the mama would look up at the stars and make a wish. Do you know what she wished for? Caleb shook his head, already half asleep. She wished that somehow, some way, she would find her way back to her little boy, because she loved him more than all the stars in the sky, more than all the grass on the prairie, more than anything in the whole wide world. Nora's voice caught. And one day, after a very long time, her wish came true. She found her way home, and she never, ever wanted to leave again. Caleb was asleep before she finished, his breathing slow and even against Reed's chest. Reed sat there for a moment longer, looking at his son, and when he finally looked up at Nora, his eyes were wet. I want to believe you, he said hoarsely. God help me, Nora. I want to believe every word you've said. Then believe me. It's not that simple. 4 years, Nora. 4 years of thinking you chose to leave, of explaining to my son why his mama didn't want us. I did want you. I do want you. Both of you. More than anything. Reed stood carefully, cradling Caleb, and carried him upstairs. When he came back down, his face was set in hard lines. We'll wait for the judge, he said, and we'll hear what he has to say about those papers. But Nora, if there's even a chance that what Lucien says is true, that you were actually married to him and committed legally, it's not true. But if it is, I can't keep you here. I won't break the law, even for... He stopped himself. Even for me, Nora finished quietly. Reed looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw all the years of hurt, all the love that had never quite died, all the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about her. Get some sleep, he said finally. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But Nora couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot in the tack room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the ranch at night. cattle lowing, horses moving in their stalls, the wind whistling through the eaves. And she thought about Lucien, about his cold smile and his threats, about the power he wielded and the money he could use to make lies look like truth. She thought about Reed's face when he'd seen those papers, the way belief and doubt had warred in his eyes. She thought about Caleb, asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever dreams 4-year-old boys dreamed. And she made a decision. If the judge sided with Lucien, if the law said she had to go back to that place, she wouldn't go quietly. She would fight. She would tell everyone what had been done to her, would drag Lucien's crimes into the light, even if no one believed her. Because Caleb deserved to know his mother hadn't abandoned him. Reed deserved to know she'd never stopped loving him. And she deserved to fight for her freedom, even if she lost. Morning came too soon. Nora woke to the sound of horses and voices. Judge Crane had arrived, along with Jake and 2 other men from town. She dressed quickly and emerged from the tack room to find them all gathered in the yard. Reed, the judge, Jake, and several ranch hands. Judge Elwood Crane was an older man with white hair and sharp eyes, wearing a long coat against the morning chill. He looked at Nora with neither sympathy nor condemnation, just professional assessment. "Mrs. Ashford," he said. "Or should I say Mrs. Braddock?" "My name is Nora Ashford," she said clearly. "I was never legally married to Lucien Braddock. Mr. Braddock has provided documentation that says otherwise." The judge held up the papers Lucien had shown Reed the night before. "Marriage certificate dated 3 years ago. Commitment papers signed by your father. Medical evaluations from 3 separate doctors. All appear to be properly notarized and filed with the appropriate authorities. They're forgeries paid for by Lucien Braddock to cover up kidnapping and false imprisonment." "That's a serious accusation, Mrs." The judge paused. "What would you like me to call you?" "Nora. Just Nora?" "Very well. Nora, these are serious accusations. Do you have any proof to support them?" "I have my testimony. I have my scars." She held up her wrists. "I have 4 years of missing life that can be verified if you send someone to Riverside Haven to investigate how that place really operates. And Mr. Braddock has documentation, multiple witnesses, and a reputation as a respected businessman." Judge Crane's tone was neutral but not unkind. "You understand my difficulty here." I understand that money and power can make anything look legitimate," Nora said, "but that doesn't make it true." "Perhaps not, but it does make it legal until proven otherwise." The judge looked at Reed. "Mr. Ashford, what's your involvement in this matter?" "Nora is my wife," Reed said, and Nora's heart stopped. "We were married 5 years ago. She disappeared 4 years ago, the night after our son was born. Until 6 days ago, I believed she'd abandoned us. Now I'm not so sure." "You believe her story about being kidnapped and held against her will?" Reed hesitated and Nora held her breath. Finally he said, "I believe something happened to her, something bad. Whether it's exactly what she claims, I don't know. But I know the woman I married wouldn't have left our son willingly. And I know the Nora standing here now isn't the same as the woman in Braddock's papers. She's half-starved, terrified, and fighting like hell to stay here. That doesn't match up with someone who's been receiving proper care." Judge Crane nodded slowly. "I see." He turned back to Nora. "Here's what I'm prepared to do. I'll send a deputy to Newton City to investigate Riverside Haven and verify Mr. Braddock's claims. I'll also send inquiries to the authorities who supposedly notarized these documents. Until I hear back, which will take at least a week, possibly 2, you'll remain here under Mr. Ashford's supervision. You will not leave the property, you will not attempt to flee, and you will make yourself available for questioning if needed. If you agree to these terms, I'll hold off on any decision until we have more information." "And if she doesn't agree?" Reed asked. "Then I have no choice but to remand her to Mr. Braddock's custody, as he has legal documentation and she has only her word." Nora looked at Reed, who gave her a slight nod. It wasn't perfect, but it was time. Time to prove her story, time to gather evidence, time to expose Lucien's crimes. "I agree," she said. "Good." Judge Crane tucked the papers into his coat. "I'll inform Mr. Braddock of my decision. I imagine he won't be pleased, but the law requires proper investigation of claims this serious. In the meantime, Mr. Ashford, you're responsible for her. If she disappears, she won't. Reed said firmly. After the judge left, Reed turned to Nora. You've got 2 weeks, maybe less if Braddock pushes hard enough. We need to use that time to find real proof, something more than testimony and scars. I don't know what proof I can give you, Nora said helplessly. Everything I had was taken from me. My clothes, my possessions, even my memories were questioned until I started doubting them myself. The only proof is at Riverside Haven, and if you think Lucien hasn't already sent word to have any evidence destroyed, then we find other proof. Reed's voice was determined. Other patients who escaped, nurses or doctors who might talk, financial records showing payments to your father. Something, Nora, there has to be something. Boss? Jake approached, his weathered face troubled. Got a problem. Some of the hands are talking, saying they don't feel right working for a man who's harboring a crazy woman, saying if Mrs. Ashford, if Nora, is really sick like Braddock claims, she might be dangerous. Reed's jaw tightened. Tell them if they don't like it, they can draw their pay and leave. Anyone who stays works for me, not for town gossip. Already told them that. Lost 2 men. Then we make do with who's left. Reed looked at Nora. Go help with breakfast. I need to check the fences in the north pasture. Make sure we're ready for winter. It was a dismissal, but not an unkind one. Nora went to the house where she found Caleb in the kitchen, building a tower out of wooden blocks. Morning, sweetheart, she said softly. Caleb looked up and smiled, the kind of pure, uncomplicated smile that made everything else fade away. Morning, can you help me make it taller? They built towers together for an hour, Caleb chattering about everything and nothing, his favorite horse, the snake he'd seen last week, the story Papa had told him about stars, and Nora soaked in every word, every smile, every moment of being his mother, because she didn't know how many more moments she'd get. The next few days passed in a strange suspension. Nora working alongside Reed and the remaining ranch hands, Caleb following her everywhere like a shadow, and the whole time knowing that Lucien was out there somewhere, plotting his next move. On the 4th day after Judge Crane's visit, Reed came to her at dusk while she was bringing water to the horses. I'm riding to Newton City tomorrow, he said without preamble. I'm going to find Riverside Haven and see it for myself. Talk to people, look at records, get some real answers. Nora's hands tightened on the water bucket. That's 3 days' ride. What about Caleb, the ranch? Jake can manage the ranch, and Caleb... Reed paused. I'm trusting you with him, Nora. Mrs. Henderson will come stay at the house to help, but you'll be his primary caretaker. Can you do that? Yes. The word came out fierce and certain. Yes, Reed. I can do that. I know. His eyes held hers. That's why I'm asking. I'm starting to believe you, Nora, about all of it, but I need to see the truth with my own eyes. I need to be able to tell my son, when he's old enough to understand, that I did everything I could to find out what really happened to his mother. Thank you, Nora whispered. Reed reached out and touched her cheek, just a brief touch, but it sent warmth flooding through her. Don't thank me yet. Lucien's probably watching the ranch. The minute I leave, he might try something. You need to be careful. Stay close to the house, keep Caleb with you, and if anyone shows up, anyone at all, you send for Jake immediately. Understood? Understood. That night, Nora lay awake in the tack room, listening to the sounds of Reed packing for his journey. She wanted to go to him, to tell him all the things she'd been holding back, how much she still loved him, how grateful she was for this chance, how terrified she was that it would all fall apart. But she stayed where she was, because some conversations needed time and proof and healing before they could happen. Reed left at dawn. Caleb cried when he saw his father riding away, and Nora held him close, murmuring reassurances. Papa will be back soon, she promised. He's going to find out the truth, and then everything will be all right. What if the bad man comes back? Caleb asked, his face pressed against her shoulder. Then we'll be brave together, you and me, Mrs. Henderson arrived an hour later, carrying a basket of supplies and wearing a determined expression. All right, girl, Reed told me what's happening. I'll stay here at the house, help with the cooking and such. But you're in charge of that little boy. Think you can manage? Yes, ma'am. Good. Because if Lucien Braddock shows his face around here, we're going to show him what prairie women are made of. For 3 days, it was almost peaceful. Nora cooked meals, cared for Caleb, helped Jake with the lighter ranch work. Caleb followed her everywhere, talking constantly, asking questions, and slowly, so slowly, beginning to call her Mama without hesitation. On the third night, Nora was putting Caleb to bed when he wrapped his arms around her neck and whispered, "I'm glad you came back. Even if you have to go away again, I'm glad I got to know you." "I'm not going anywhere," Nora promised, even though she knew it might be a lie. "I'm staying right here with you." But the next morning, the morning Reed was due to return, everything changed. Caleb woke up burning with fever. Nora knew immediately that something was wrong. His skin was hot to the touch, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He whimpered when she tried to get him to drink water, and his small body was racked with shivers despite the blankets. "Mrs. Henderson," Nora called, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Something's wrong with Caleb." The older woman took one look at the boy and paled. "It's the fever. The same one that's been going through town. Lost 2 children to it already." "No." Nora's voice was fierce. "No, he's not going to die. Tell me what to do." "Keep him cool. Get the fever down any way you can, and pray." For the next 12 hours, Nora didn't leave Caleb's side. She bathed him with cool cloths, forced water down his throat drop by drop, sang to him when he cried, held him when he shook. Mrs. Henderson helped when she could, but this was Nora's fight. This was her son, her baby, and she would not lose him. Night fell, and Caleb's fever climbed higher. He was delirious, calling for Reed, crying out about monsters and shadows. Nora held him against her chest, rocking him, whispering every prayer she could remember. "Please," she whispered to whatever God might be listening. "Please don't take him from me. Just got him back, please." Dawn was breaking when the fever finally crested. Caleb's skin was still hot, but not the terrifying burning heat of the night before. His breathing was easier, and when Nora bathed his forehead with cool water, his eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" he whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. I don't feel good." "I know, baby, but you're going to be all right. The fever's breaking." Caleb closed his eyes again, but this time it was true sleep, not the restless, fevered unconsciousness of before. Nora held him, tears streaming down her face, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. That's when she heard the horses, multiple riders coming fast. Through the window she saw them, Lucien and his men, along with 2 men wearing badges, the sheriff and his deputy. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, her face grim. "They've got papers, Nora. Legal orders. Judge Crane's investigation came back. Lucian's lawyers got to the right people, paid off the right witnesses. They're saying the commitment was legitimate, that you're legally Lucian's wife, and that you need to be returned to his custody immediately." "No." Nora looked down at Caleb, still sleeping, still fighting the fever. "No, I'm not leaving him. Not now. You might not have a choice." "Then I'll make a choice." Nora's voice was steel. "Go get Jake. Tell him to get every ranch hand we have, every person in town who might listen. I'm not going quietly. If they want to take me, they're going to have to drag me out of here in front of everyone. And I'm going to tell the truth, the whole truth, where everyone can hear it." Mrs. Henderson nodded once and disappeared. Nora heard her calling for Jake, heard the ranch coming alive with voices and movement. She looked down at Caleb, pressed a kiss to his hot forehead, and whispered, "I love you. No matter what happens next, remember that I love you." Then she stood, laid Caleb gently in his bed, and went downstairs to face the men who wanted to take her freedom. She'd survived 4 years in hell. She'd fought her way home. She'd nursed her son through fever. She could do this. She had to do this, because this was her last chance to fight for her family, and she wasn't going to waste it. Retried. Nora stepped out onto the porch, just as Lucien dismounted from his horse with the casual confidence of a man who knew the law was on his side. The sheriff and his deputy flanked him, both looking uncomfortable but determined. Behind them, Lucien's 4 hired men sat their horses like sentinels, hands resting near their weapons. The ranch yard had filled with people in the few minutes since Mrs. Henderson had sounded the alarm. Jake and the remaining ranch hands stood in a loose semicircle, armed but not threatening. Beyond them, townspeople had begun to arrive, drawn by curiosity or concern. Nora couldn't tell which. She recognized faces from Main Street, from the boarding house, from the general store. All of them watching, all of them waiting to see what would happen. Good. She wanted witnesses. Nora, Lucian said pleasantly, spreading his hands as if greeting an old friend. There you are, darling. It's time to come home now. I am home, Nora said, her voice carrying across the yard. This is my home. That little boy upstairs is my son, and you have no right to take me from them. The sheriff stepped forward, pulling a folded document from his coat. Ma'am, I'm afraid I do have the right. Judge Crane's investigation confirmed Mr. Braddock's documentation. You're legally his wife, and he has legal custody of you due to your medical condition. I'm here to enforce the law. Then the law is wrong, Nora said flatly. She looked past the sheriff to the gathered crowd, raising her voice so everyone could hear. 4 years ago, I didn't abandon my husband and newborn son. I was kidnapped, drugged, and taken from my bed in the middle of the night. My father sold me to Lucien Braddock to pay his gambling debts, and Lucien locked me away in an asylum where he kept me prisoner for 4 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lucien's expression didn't change, but Nora saw the flash of anger in his eyes. You see, he said to the sheriff, his voice full of regret. The delusions again. Sheriff, please, this is painful for everyone involved. Let's get my wife into the carriage so she can receive proper care. I'm not delusional, Nora's voice cracked with fury. I can tell you the name of every nurse who worked at Riverside Haven. I can describe the room they kept me in. 12 feet by 8 feet, white walls, barred window facing east, iron bed frame bolted to the floor. I can tell you about Margaret, who set the fire that let me escape. I can tell you about the drugs they gave me 3 times a day to keep me compliant, about the restraints they used when I fought back, about the 4 years of hell I survived because I knew that my son was out here somewhere waiting for his mama to come home. More murmurs. Some of the townspeople were looking at her with something like belief now, but others still looked skeptical. Lucien had money and power and the weight of legal documentation. She had nothing but her words. Ma'am, the deputy said quietly, almost apologetically, we have our orders. We need to take you into custody. No, Nora backed up against the door. I'm not leaving. My son is upstairs fighting a fever. He almost died last night. I sat with him for 12 hours, bathing his forehead, forcing water down his throat, praying he'd live to see another sunrise. And he did. The fever broke at dawn, but he's still sick, still weak, and I'm not leaving him. The boy will be fine, Lucien said dismissively. Mr. Ashford can care for him. You need to come with us now, Nora. You're only making this harder on everyone. Making it harder? Nora laughed, and there was an edge of hysteria in it. You stole 4 years of my life, Lucien. You kept me locked in a cage like an animal. You paid doctors to declare me insane, paid my father to sign away my rights, paid forgers to create a marriage certificate for a wedding that never happened. And now you stand there with your legal papers and your bought witnesses and tell me I'm making things harder? That's enough. The sheriff's voice was firmer now. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but you need to come along peacefully. Don't make me— Make you what? Nora's voice rose. Drag me away from my sick child? Force me into a carriage against my will? Do it then. But you'll do it in front of all these people. You'll do it where everyone can see exactly what you're helping him do to me. The sheriff hesitated, glancing at the crowd. Some of the townspeople were shifting uncomfortably now, and Nora pressed her advantage. Ask him about the asylum, she called out to the assembled crowd. Ask him why a woman with nervous hysteria needs to be kept behind locked doors with bars on the windows. Ask him why I have scars from restraints, why I'm half-starved, why I look like I've been through hell. Ask him why, if I'm his loving wife, I'm terrified of him. Because you're sick, Lucien's veneer of patience was cracking. Because you need treatment, and you're too ill to understand what's best for you. Then let me prove I'm not sick. Nora looked directly at the sheriff. Give me a test. Ask me questions. Examine me. If I'm truly delusional, truly insane, surely that will be obvious. But if I'm not, if I can demonstrate that I'm perfectly sane and that everything I'm saying is true, then you need to investigate those papers more closely. The sheriff looked uncertain. That's not how the law works, ma'am. But it's how justice works, came a new voice. Everyone turned. A woman was pushing through the crowd, middle-aged, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. Nora didn't recognize her at first, but then the woman spoke again, and memory clicked into place. "My name is Dr. Sarah Winters," the woman said. "I'm a physician from Newton City. I've been traveling through this region, examining public health conditions, and I happened to be in town when I heard about this situation." She looked at Nora with professional interest. "I've also heard rumors about Riverside Haven, disturbing rumors about the treatment of female patients there." Hope flared in Nora's chest. "You know about that place?" "I know of it," Dr. Winters corrected. "I've never been permitted inside. The directors refuse to allow outside physicians to examine their practices. But I've treated 3 women who escaped from there over the past 2 years. All 3 told similar stories of false commitments, drugged compliance, and imprisonment masquerading as treatment." Lucian's face had gone pale. "This is highly irregular. Sheriff, you have your orders, and I'm trying to execute them without causing unnecessary harm," the sheriff snapped, his own patients clearly wearing thin. He looked at Dr. Winters. "You're saying this woman might be telling the truth?" "I'm saying she deserves a fair examination before you haul her off to an institution," Dr. Winters replied. "I can perform that examination right now, if you'll permit it. It will take less than an hour, and then we'll have a medical opinion from an independent physician. Surely Mr. Braddock wouldn't object to that if his wife's condition is as clear-cut as he claims." The trap was beautifully laid. If Lucian objected, it would look like he had something to hide. If he agreed, Nora would have a chance to prove her sanity. "This is absurd," Lucian said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "The papers are legitimate. The commitment was legal. Then you have nothing to fear from an independent examination," Dr. Winters said coolly. "Unless, of course, you do have something to hide." The crowd was fully engaged now, watching the standoff with rapt attention. The sheriff looked from Dr. Winters to Lucian to Nora, clearly trying to decide what the right course of action was. "1 hour," he said finally. "Dr. Winters can examine Mrs." He paused. "Can examine the lady in question, but Mr. Braddock stays on the property, and my deputy stays at the door. After the examination, we proceed according to the law. Agreed?" It wasn't perfect, but it was a chance. "Agreed," Nora said immediately. "This is outrageous," Lucian began. "1 hour won't make a difference if your papers are as solid as you claim," the sheriff interrupted. "And it might save us all a lot of trouble down the road. Dr. Winters, proceed with your examination." Dr. Winters gestured for Nora to lead the way inside. They went up to Caleb's room, where the little boy was still sleeping fitfully, his face flushed with lingering fever. "Doctor," Winters examined him briefly, then nodded. "The fever's breaking. He should be fine with continued rest and fluids." She turned her full attention to Nora. "Now then, let's begin." The examination was thorough and surprisingly gentle. Dr. Winters asked Nora questions about her memory, her perceptions, her experiences. She examined Nora's physical condition, noting the scars on her wrists, the evidence of prolonged malnutrition, the muscle tremors that came from months of forced sedation, followed by abrupt withdrawal. "Tell me about the drugs they gave you," Dr. Winters said, her tone clinical but not unkind. "Laudanum, mostly. Sometimes chloral hydrate when I fought the restraints. They called it treatment for nervous agitation, but it was just a way to keep me docile." Nora's voice was steady now, focused. "The doses were carefully calculated, enough to keep me compliant but not enough to kill me. Lucian wanted me alive and controllable, not dead." "And the restraints?" "Leather straps on a regular bed frame at first. Later, when I kept trying to escape, they moved me to a room with iron rings bolted into the wall." Nora held up her wrists, showing the scars. "These are from fighting those restraints. I pulled against them until my wrists bled, night after night, trying to work them loose." Dr. Winters examined the scars closely, then made notes in a small leather journal. "These are consistent with prolonged restraint, not self-harm. The pattern of scarring indicates repeated trauma over an extended period." She looked up at Nora. "Tell me about your escape." So Nora told her about Margaret and the fire, about running through the darkness, about stealing clothes and food, and traveling for days to get home. Dr. Winters listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression professionally neutral. When Nora finished, Dr. Winters was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I need to check on something. Wait here." She left the room, and Nora could hear her speaking with someone downstairs, a low, urgent conversation. Minutes crawled by. Caleb stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, and Nora smoothed his hair back from his forehead, whispering reassurances. Finally, Dr. Winters returned, but she wasn't alone. Mrs. Henderson was with her, and the older woman's face was grim. "Tell Dr. Winters what you told me," Mrs. Henderson said. "About what?" "About the night Nora disappeared. You said you remembered something." Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. "I didn't think much of it at the time. It didn't seem important. But the night Nora disappeared, I saw a fancy carriage outside the Ashford house. 3 in the morning it was. I was up with a sick grandchild looking out the window, and I saw this carriage. Big black thing, the kind rich folks from the city use. Had a crest on the side, though I couldn't make out what it was in the dark." Dr. Winters looked at Lucian through the window, where he stood in the yard looking increasingly agitated. "What does Mr. Braddock's family crest look like?" "A raven, over 2 crossed swords," Mrs. Henderson said. "I've seen it on his business cards in town. Same crest that was on that carriage 4 years ago." The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but Nora knew they needed more. One woman's midnight observation wouldn't be enough to overturn Lucian's legal papers. "There's something else," Dr. Winters said quietly. "I sent my assistant to Newton City 3 days ago to investigate Riverside Haven more thoroughly. He returned this morning with some very interesting information." She pulled a telegram from her pocket. "It seems Riverside Haven is currently under investigation by the Territorial Medical Board for numerous violations, including accepting patients without proper legal documentation, administering excessive drugs, and financial irregularities. Several staff members have already been arrested and more charges are pending." Hope surged through Nora's chest. "Does that mean—" "It means the institution where you were held is now legally questionable. Any commitments made through that facility are under review." Dr. Winters' voice was careful but hopeful. "And if we can prove that your commitment was fraudulent, then everything else, the marriage, the legal guardianship, all of it, comes into question." "But how do we prove it was fraudulent?" "We get your father's signature examined by a handwriting expert. We find witnesses who can testify about the night you disappeared. We investigate Mr. Braddock's financial records to see if there are payments that correspond to bribes or payoffs." Dr. Winters looked at Nora steadily. "But most importantly, I need to give my professional opinion. And my opinion is that you are not now, nor have you ever been, suffering from nervous hysteria or any other mental condition that would warrant commitment. You're a sane woman who was illegally imprisoned, and I'm prepared to testify to that in any court in the territory." Nora felt tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to convince the sheriff and the crowd outside that you're telling the truth, and Mr. Braddock isn't going to give up easily." They went downstairs together, Dr. Winters carrying her medical bag and her notes. The crowd had grown even larger. It seemed like half the town had turned out to watch the drama unfold. The sheriff stood near Lucian, looking deeply uncomfortable, while the deputy kept watch at the door. "Well?" the sheriff asked when Dr. Winters emerged. "What's your verdict?" "My verdict," Dr. Winters said clearly, her voice carrying across the yard, "is that this woman shows no signs of mental illness whatsoever. She's coherent, rational, and demonstrates clear memory and reasoning abilities. The physical evidence, malnutrition, scarring, and symptoms consistent with forced sedation supports her claim of imprisonment and abuse, not medical treatment." "That's ridiculous," Lucian snapped. "She's been examined by 3 separate physicians who all declared her mentally unfit. Physicians employed by Riverside Haven, an institution now under investigation for fraud and abuse," Dr. Winters countered. "Forgive me if I don't consider their assessments reliable." "The papers are still legal," the sheriff said, but there was doubt in his voice now. "Judge Crane verified them." "Judge Crane verified that they appeared legitimate," Dr. Winters corrected. "But appearance and truth aren't always the same thing. Sheriff, I strongly recommend you delay any action until a full investigation can be conducted. This woman has credible claims of kidnapping and false imprisonment. If you force her to return to Mr. Braddock's custody and it later turns out she was telling the truth, you'll be complicit in a serious crime." The sheriff looked torn. Nora could see him weighing his duty to enforce the law against the growing evidence that the law itself might be corrupted. Before he could respond, another commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. A horse was thundering up the road, its rider pushing it hard. As it drew closer, Nora's heart leaped. It was Reed, covered in dust from hard riding, his face grim and determined. He pulled his horse to a halt in the middle of the yard, dismounted in one smooth motion, and strode directly to the sheriff. "Stop," he said, breathing hard. "Don't do anything until you hear what I found." "Mr. Ashford," the sheriff said wearily, "this really isn't—" "I've been to Riverside Haven," Reed interrupted. "I've talked to patients, to former staff members, to people in Newton City who know Braddock's reputation. And I've got proof, real proof, that everything Nora said is true." He pulled a stack of papers from his saddlebag and handed them to the sheriff. Testimony from 3 women who were held at Riverside Haven under false pretenses. Statements from 2 nurses who quit because they couldn't stomach what was being done to patients. Financial records showing payments from Lucien Braddock to Nora's father, $50,000, paid over 3 months leading up to Nora's disappearance. The sheriff shuffled through the papers, his expression growing darker with each page. "Where did you get these?" "From people who were afraid to come forward before because Braddock has money and power," Reed said. "But when I told them there was a woman fighting for her freedom, fighting to get back to her son, they agreed to give testimony. Some of them came with me. They're back at the town hall right now, waiting to make formal statements." Lucian's face had gone from pale to red, fury replacing his earlier composure. "This is a conspiracy. These people are lying. They've been paid to tell these stories. Like you paid doctors to declare Nora insane?" Reed's voice was cold as winter. "Like you paid her father to sell his daughter? Like you paid forgers to create a marriage certificate for a wedding that never happened? You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can." Reed pulled out one more document, a marriage certificate, but not the one Lucian had shown the sheriff. "This is Nora's real marriage certificate, from our wedding 5 years ago. Witnessed by Judge Crane himself, you can verify the signature. If Nora married me 5 years ago, then she couldn't have legally married you 3 years ago, could she? Which means your marriage certificate is a forgery." The sheriff compared the 2 documents, then looked at Lucien with hard eyes. "Mr. Braddock, I think you'd better come with me to the town hall. We need to have a serious conversation about these discrepancies." "I'm not going anywhere," Lucien snarled. "I have rights. I have legal documentation. You can't just—" "I can and I am," the sheriff said firmly. "Deputy, please escort Mr. Braddock to town, peacefully, if possible." For a moment, Nora thought Lucien might actually resist. His hired men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons. But then Jake and the ranch hands closed ranks, their own weapons clearly visible, and the odds suddenly looked very different. Lucien must have done the math because he backed down. But before he let the deputy lead him toward a horse, he looked at Nora with pure venom. "This isn't over," he said softly. "I have lawyers, connections, money. You think you've won? You've won nothing. I'll drag this through every court in the territory, and eventually, they'll give you back to me. And when they do, Nora, I'll make sure you never see daylight again." "Get him out of here," the sheriff said tiredly. As Lucien was led away, the crowd erupted in chatter. Some people looked shocked, others vindicated, still others just confused by the whole dramatic spectacle. But Nora barely noticed any of them. She was looking at Reed, this man who had ridden for 3 days to find proof, who had believed her enough to fight for her, who had never truly stopped loving her even when he thought she'd abandoned him. "You came back," she said, her voice breaking. "I promised I would." Reed climbed the porch steps until he stood in front of her. "And I found the truth. All of it. Every word you said was true, Nora. Every single word." "You believe me?" "I believe you. I should have believed you from the start." His hand came up to cup her cheek and she leaned into the touch, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. Sorry I didn't look harder when you first disappeared. Sorry for every moment of pain you suffered because I wasn't there to protect you." "You're here now," Nora whispered. "That's what matters." "Papa!" They both turned to see Caleb in the doorway, held steady by Mrs. Henderson. He was pale and shaky, but his fever had clearly broken and his eyes were clear. "Hey, buddy," Reed said softly, reaching for his son. You feeling better? Mama made me better, Caleb said with the absolute certainty of childhood. She stayed with me all night and made the fever go away. Reed looked at Nora, and in his eyes she saw everything: belief, gratitude, love, hope, and the beginning of healing. She didn't she? Is Mama staying now? Caleb asked, looking between his parents. She doesn't have to go away again? No, son, Reed said, his voice thick with emotion. Mama's staying right here with us, forever. Nora pulled both of them close, her husband, her son, her family, and let herself finally, truly believe it. After 4 years in hell, after escape and running and fighting, after doubt and fear and desperate hope, she was finally home. The crowd was dispersing now, the drama over for the moment. Dr. Winters approached the porch, her medical bag in hand. I'll file my report with Judge Crane, she said, and I'll make sure everyone knows what really happened at Riverside Haven. But Mrs. Ashford, she paused. You should know that Mr. Braddock wasn't exaggerating about his resources. He will fight this. It could take months, maybe years, to fully clear your name and invalidate all his false documentation. Then we'll fight for as long as it takes, Reed said firmly. I'm not letting anyone take her away again. Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. Good. You'll need that determination. She looked at Nora. You're stronger than you know, Mrs. Ashford. Most women wouldn't have survived what you've been through, but you did, and you made it home. Hold on to that strength. You're going to need it in the days ahead. After Dr. Winters left, Reed carried Caleb back upstairs to bed, and Nora followed them, her legs shaky with exhaustion and relief. She helped Reed tuck Caleb in, and the little boy grabbed both their hands. Tell me a story, he mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. Both of you. So they did. They sat on either side of his bed and told him a story about a brave little boy and a mama who fought her way home and a papa who never gave up hope. And by the time they finished, Caleb was sound asleep, a small smile on his face. Reed and Nora sat there for a long moment, just looking at their son, neither of them quite ready to break the spell of this moment. Finally, Reed said quietly, I went to Riverside Haven. I saw the room where they kept you. Nora's breath caught. Reed, 12 by 8 feet, white walls, barred window facing east, iron bed bolted to the floor. His voice was strained. You described it perfectly. And when I saw it, when I realized you'd been locked in that cage for 4 years, he stopped, his jaw working. I wanted to burn the whole building down. It doesn't matter now. I'm here. It does matter. Reed turned to face her fully. It matters because while I was angry at you for leaving, while I was teaching our son to live without his mother, you were in that hell fighting to get back to us. And I didn't look for you. I didn't question the note. I just accepted that you'd left, and I let you go. You had no way of knowing. I should have known. I should have trusted that the woman I loved wouldn't abandon our child. But I let my hurt and pride get in the way of looking for the truth. Reed took her hand, his grip almost desperate. Can you forgive me? Reed, there's nothing to forgive. You thought I left. The note, my father's testimony, everything pointed to me running away. How could you have known different? Because I knew you. The real you. And the real you would never have left Caleb. He raised her scarred wrist to his lips, pressing a kiss to the damaged skin. I failed you when you needed me most. But I swear to you, Nora, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I'll fight every legal battle, face down every threat, do whatever it takes to keep you safe and free. All I want is to be here, with you and Caleb. That's all I've ever wanted. Reed pulled her close, and Nora let herself sink into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and horses and prairie wind. It felt like coming home in a way that even returning to the ranch hadn't. This was where she belonged, in his arms with their son nearby, building the life that had been stolen from them. I love you, Reed whispered against her hair. I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought you were gone, even when I was so angry I could barely breathe, I never stopped. I love you too, Nora said, her voice muffled against his chest. Every day in that place, every moment I thought I might not survive, I held on to you. You and Caleb were my light in the dark. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while their son slept peacefully nearby. Outside, the sun was setting over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A new day would come tomorrow, bringing with it new challenges, legal battles to fight, reputations to rebuild, a life to reclaim. But for now, in this moment, Nora let herself simply be. Be home. Be safe. Be loved. That night, after Mrs. Henderson had gone back to town and the ranch had settled into quiet, Nora stood at the window of her old room, the room she'd been taken from 4 years ago, and looked out at the land she'd fought so hard to return to. Reed came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and together they watched the stars emerge one by one. "Do you remember our wedding night?" Reed asked softly. "Every detail. I promised you forever that night, promised you I'd always be here, always keep you safe." His voice was rough. "I broke that promise." "No, you didn't. You kept our son safe. You kept the ranch running. You held everything together when it should have fallen apart." Nora turned in his arms to face him. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do, Reed. You survived. You built a life for Caleb. You became the father he needed. But I survived too, and now we're both here, both alive, both fighting for our family. That's not failure, Reed. That's victory." He kissed her then, soft and gentle at first, then deeper, 4 years of longing and loss and love pouring between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "I want to remarry you," he said. "I know we're already married, but I want to do it again, in front of the whole town. I want everyone to see that you're my wife, that you've always been my wife, and that no forged paper or corrupt judge or rich bastard with too much money is going to change that." Nora smiled through her tears. "I'd like that. And I want to adopt Caleb formally, put it in legal documents that he's our son so no one can ever question it." "He's already our son." "I know, but I want it official. I want every legal protection we can get around this family, so that when Braddock comes back with his lawyers, and he will come back, we're ready." "We'll be ready," Nora agreed. "Together." They went downstairs hand in hand, and Reed poured them each a small glass of whiskey. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Nora had bandaged Caleb's knee, where she'd eaten her first real meal back home, where so many small moments of her reclaimed life had happened. "Tell me about the women you met in Newton City," Nora said. "The ones who gave testimony." Reed's expression darkened. 3 of them, all held at Riverside Haven under false pretenses, just like you. One was committed by her husband because she'd inherited money he wanted to control. Another was sent there by her brother after she refused to marry the man he'd chosen for her. The third, he paused. The third was only 17 when her father had her committed for moral deficiency after she tried to leave home. "Where are they now?" "Safe. One staying with Dr. Winters, who's helping her get legal representation. The other 2 have family who are willing to take them in now that the truth is coming out." Reed took a drink. "They all wanted me to tell you something. They said you were brave for fighting back, for coming home, for not letting Braddock win. They said you gave them hope that they could fight back too." Nora felt tears pricking her eyes again. "I just wanted to get home to my family." "And you did. Against impossible odds, you did." Reed reached across the table to take her hand. "But Nora, you need to know, this fight isn't over. Braddock's being held at the town jail for now, but his lawyers will have him out by morning. And then the real battle begins. Court hearings, depositions, testimony. It could take months to sort through all the legal complications, and the whole time the town will be watching, judging, gossiping. I know, but I'm not afraid of gossip anymore. I survived 4 years in hell. I can survive some wagging tongues. You shouldn't have to survive anything. You should be able to just live, just be a wife and mother without—" Reed's voice broke, "without having to fight for the right to exist." "But that's what life is sometimes," Nora said gently. "Fighting for the right to exist, to be free, to be with the people you love. And I'll keep fighting as long as I have to. Because this—" She gestured around the kitchen, toward the stairs where Caleb slept. "This is worth fighting for." They finished their drinks in comfortable silence, and then Reed walked Nora to the door of what had been the tack room. "You don't have to sleep out here anymore," he said. Your room upstairs is still yours. Our room. I know, but Caleb's still fighting off that fever, and I want to be close in case he needs me during the night. Tomorrow, maybe, or the next day. Reed nodded, understanding. Nora? Thank you. For what? For not giving up, for fighting your way back, for being the strongest person I've ever known. He kissed her goodnight, a promise of more to come, and then headed back to the house. Nora watched him go, then turned to look at the prairie stretching out under the stars. Somewhere out there, Lucian Braddock was plotting his next move. Somewhere, lawyers were preparing documents, and judges were reviewing testimony. Somewhere, the machinery of law and power was grinding forward. But here, on this ranch, in this small corner of the territory, Nora Ashford was home. She was free. She was with her family. And whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength that had carried her through 4 years of hell. She'd survived the worst. She could survive anything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new tests. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Nora went to sleep without bars on her windows or locks on her doors. She went to sleep knowing that when she woke up, she would still be free, still be home, still be fighting for her family. And that, she thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was more than worth fighting for. It was everything. The morning sun was barely cresting the horizon when Nora heard the commotion. She'd been awake for hours, unable to sleep past dawn, now that freedom meant she could actually watch the sunrise without bars obscuring her view. She was bringing water from the pump when she saw the riders approaching. Not Lucian's men this time, but townspeople, dozens of them. Her first instinct was fear, a cold spike of panic that sent her back 4 years to the night she'd been taken. But then she saw their faces, saw what they were carrying, and realized they weren't coming to take her away. They were coming to help. Mrs. Henderson led the procession, riding in a wagon loaded with supplies. Behind her came families Nora recognized from town, the Johnsons, the Mitchells, the Carters, all carrying baskets and bundles. Even old Pastor Williams was there, his weathered face kind beneath his broad-brimmed hat. Reed emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his work pants, looking as confused as Nora felt. "What's all this?" he called out. Mrs. Henderson climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for a woman her age. "This," she said firmly, "is the town of Ashford Hollow taking care of its own. We heard what really happened to Nora, and we're here to make amends for believing the lies." "You don't need to," Nora started, but Mrs. Henderson cut her off. "Hush now. We do need to. We believed you'd abandon your family without even questioning it. We let you stand alone yesterday when you should have had the whole town behind you from the start." She gestured to the loaded wagon. "So we brought food, fabric for new dresses, supplies for the ranch, and more than that," she pulled out a thick folder of papers. "We brought testimony. Every person here has signed a statement about the night you disappeared. Margaret Johnson saw that fancy carriage. Tom Mitchell heard your father bragging at the saloon about coming into money. The pastor here remembers your father asking about legal ways to break marriage contracts. All of it goes to proving you were taken against your will." Nora felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, just accept the help." Mrs. Henderson's voice softened. "We failed you once, girl. We're not going to fail you again." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. The women descended on the house, bringing in food and supplies, while the men helped Reed with ranch work that had been piling up during his trip to Newton City. Children played in the yard, their laughter ringing out across the prairie. And for the first time since returning home, Nora felt like she truly belonged here again. Caleb woke to the sound of the commotion and came downstairs in his nightshirt, eyes wide with wonder at all the people. He attached himself to Nora's side immediately, and she saw several of the women exchange knowing smiles. "That boy hasn't left her side since she came back," Mrs. Henderson observed to another woman, not bothering to lower her voice. "Blood knows blood, even when 4 years have passed." The women set up in the kitchen, organizing supplies and preparing food. Nora tried to help, but they kept shooing her away, insisting she sit and rest. Finally, she gave up and just sat at the table with Caleb in her lap, watching the organized chaos unfold around her. "Mrs. Ashford?" A young woman approached hesitantly. Sarah Mitchell, Tom's daughter, whom Nora remembered as a girl of 14. She was 18 now, nearly grown. I wanted to apologize. When you came back, I believed the rumors. I told people you must have been crazy to leave a man like Mr. Ashford. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize, Nora said gently. You believed what everyone believed. But I should have questioned it, should have wondered why a new mother would just run off. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. My mama almost died having me. She was sick for weeks after, and the whole time all she cared about was making sure I was fed and warm and safe. That's what mothers do. They don't just leave. No, Nora agreed softly. They don't. Sarah impulsively hugged her, and Nora hugged back, feeling another small piece of her heart healing. One by one, other women came forward with their own apologies, their own stories of doubt and shame, and Nora forgave them all because she understood. Lucienne's lies had been convincing. Her father's betrayal had been thorough. No one could have known the truth without looking deeper than anyone had thought to look. By midday, the house was transformed. The pantry was stocked, the larder full, and several new dresses hung in Nora's wardrobe upstairs. The women had even brought fabric and patterns, insisting Nora pick out what she wanted so they could sew more for her. You can't keep wearing borrowed clothes, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. You're Nora Ashford, mistress of this ranch. You need to look the part. The men had been equally productive outside. Fences that needed mending were repaired, livestock was tended, and someone had even fixed the loose boards on the porch that had been bothering Reed for weeks. Jake was directing the work with the ease of a man who'd done this kind of barn-raising cooperation before, and Reed looked almost overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Never seen the town come together like this, he said to Nora when they had a quiet moment together near the corral. Not even when we had that bad winter 5 years back. They feel guilty, Nora observed. They want to make it right. Do you resent them for it? For not believing you at first? Nora considered the question. No, I'm not sure I'd have believed me either if I was in their shoes. Lucienne's story was convincing, and She looked down at her still thin frame. I look like someone who's been through something terrible. It's not hard to believe that something terrible might have broken my mind. But it didn't. Reed's voice was fierce. You're the strongest person I know, Nora. You survived hell and came back sane and whole and still capable of love. That's not weakness. That's pure strength. Before Nora could respond, Pastor Williams approached, clearing his throat politely. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, might I have a word? They moved to the porch, where the pastor settled himself on the steps with a soft grunt. He was in his 70s, had been the town's spiritual leader for as long as anyone could remember, and his opinion carried weight. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Ashford, he said without preamble. When you disappeared, your father came to me, said you'd had a crisis of faith, that you couldn't handle being a wife and mother, that you'd run off to find yourself. I believed him. Worse, I told others to believe him too. I used my position to spread his lies, thinking I was protecting your husband and child from the pain of the truth. Instead, I was protecting a criminal and condemning an innocent woman. Pastor Williams, but... Let me finish, please. His weathered hands trembled slightly. I've been a man of God for 50 years. I thought I could see truth from lies, good from evil. But I was fooled by a father's betrayal and a rich man's money. And because of that, you suffered alone while we condemned you. That's a sin I'll carry for the rest of my days. You couldn't have known, Nora said, but the pastor shook his head. I should have questioned it. Should have wondered why a woman who'd been so excited to become a mother would suddenly abandon her child. Should have trusted my own eyes. I saw you the week before Caleb was born, glowing with happiness. That doesn't just disappear overnight. He pulled out a small leather-bound book. I went through my records last night, found the entry from your wedding day. Reed Ashford and Nora Ellington joined in holy matrimony before God and these witnesses. That's the true record. That's what I'll testify to in any court that asks. Thank you, Nora whispered. Don't thank me. I'm just doing what I should have done 4 years ago, standing up for the truth. The pastor stood, his joints creaking. But I want to do more than that. When this legal mess is sorted out, I want to perform a renewal of your vows, right here, in front of the whole town. Let everyone see that you and Mr. Ashford are truly married, have always been truly married, and that no amount of money or forged papers can change that." Reed's hand found Nora's. "We'd like that, Pastor. We'd like that very much." After the pastor left, the gathering began to break up. Families headed back to town, promising to return if needed, leaving behind their gifts and their testimony and their support. By late afternoon, only Mrs. Henderson remained, helping Nora organize the kitchen. "You know this won't be the end of it," the older woman said as she arranged canned goods in the pantry. "Braddock's lawyers got him released this morning. He's at the hotel in town, and he's already making noise about taking this to the territorial courts." "I know." Nora had been expecting it. Men like Lucien didn't give up easily. "But you've got something now that you didn't have before. You've got the town on your side, you've got proof, and you've got Reed fighting for you." Mrs. Henderson paused in her work. "That man loves you fierce, Nora. Don't ever doubt that." "I don't. Not anymore." "Good. Because you're going to need that love in the days ahead. Court battles are ugly, expensive, and exhausting. They'll drag up every detail of your life, question your sanity over and over, try to make you look unstable or untrustworthy. You'll need Reed's strength to lean on when yours runs out." "What about his strength? What happens when he needs someone to lean on?" Mrs. Henderson smiled. "That's when you remember that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and healing and breaking again, but always getting back up. You do that for each other and you'll get through anything." That evening, after Mrs. Henderson had finally gone home and the ranch had settled into quiet, Reed found Nora in Caleb's room. She was sitting beside their son's bed, watching him sleep, one hand gently stroking his dark hair. "He's completely recovered," Reed said softly from the doorway. "Fever's gone, appetite's back. He ate 3 helpings at supper." "I know. I watched him eat all 3. Nora smiled. "He has your appetite. And your stubbornness." Reed came to sit beside her. "He insisted on waiting for you before he'd eat dessert. Sat there with that cake in front of him for 20 minutes until you came in from the barn. He's a good boy. He's a great boy. And he knows who his mama is." Reed's voice was warm. "Did you hear him today? When Sarah Mitchell asked him who the lady was helping in the kitchen, he said, 'That's my mama. She came back from far away to be with me.'" Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "He called me Mama?" "He's been calling you Mama since yesterday morning when you nursed him through the fever. I think that's when it really clicked for him, that you're not just Miss Nora or the lady from town. You're his mother, and he knows it in his bones." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their son sleep. Finally, Reed said, "I have to go back to town tomorrow. Judge Crane wants to take my full testimony, and there are depositions to give. I'll probably be gone most of the day. I'll be fine here with Caleb." "I know you will. But Jake's going to stay close to the house, just in case, and I'm leaving the rifle where you can reach it." Reed's voice was serious now. "I don't think Braddock will try anything. There are too many witnesses now, too much attention on this case, but I'm not taking chances with you and Caleb." "Reed," Nora took his hand, "I'm not afraid of Lucien anymore. For 4 years, he controlled everything, where I slept, what I ate, when I spoke, even what I thought. But he doesn't control me now. I'm free, and I'm with my family, and there's nothing he can do that will make me go back to being afraid. He can try to take you away. He can try, but he won't succeed." Nora's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Because I've got something now that I didn't have before. I've got people who believe me. I've got proof of what he did. And I've got the love of a good man and a brave little boy. That's armor, Reed. Better armor than any he can break through." Reed pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured. "To have a woman like you, to get a second chance after I thought I'd lost everything." "We both got a second chance," Nora corrected, "and we're not going to waste it." Later that night, after Reed had gone to bed and the house was dark and quiet, Nora stood at the window of her room, the room she'd finally moved back into, and looked out at the prairie. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light, and she could see for miles. Somewhere out there, Lucien was plotting his next move. But here, in this house, on this land, Nora Ashford was building a life. Not reclaiming an old life or trying to pretend the past 4 years hadn't happened, but building something new, something stronger, something that couldn't be taken away by forged papers or corrupt judges or men with too much money and not enough conscience. She heard a soft sound behind her and turned to find Reed in the doorway, watching her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He crossed the room to stand beside her at the window. "Want to talk about it?" "I was just thinking." Nora paused, choosing her words carefully. "For 4 years, I dreamed about coming home. I had this picture in my head of what it would be like. You'd believe me immediately. Caleb would know me. Everything would just slide back into place like I'd never been gone. But it wasn't like that. It was harder, messier, more complicated. You doubted me. Caleb didn't know me. The town thought I was crazy. Nothing was easy. Are you sorry you came back?" "No, God, no." Nora turned to face him fully. "I'm glad it was hard, actually. Because if it had been easy, if everyone had just believed me right away, I wouldn't have had to fight for it. And fighting for it, proving myself, earning trust, showing Caleb who I am, that made it real. Made it mine in a way that just sliding back into my old life never could have." Reed cupped her face in his hands. "You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just a woman who wanted to come home. No, you're a woman who refused to give up, who fought her way through hell, who survived things that would have broken most people. You're a woman who looked at impossible odds and said, 'I don't care, I'm going home anyway.' That's not just wanting something, Nora. That's being remarkable." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, and Nora melted into it. This wasn't the desperate kiss of yesterday, when everything was still uncertain and threatened. This was the kiss of two people who'd found their way back to each other, who'd weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. When they finally pulled apart, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I'm going to keep saying it until you're sick of hearing it." "I'll never be sick of hearing it." "Good, because I plan to say it every day for the rest of our lives." The next morning, Reed left for town early, and Nora threw herself into ranch work with renewed energy. She helped Jake with the horses, worked in the kitchen garden, pulling the last vegetables before the first frost, and spent hours with Caleb, teaching him letters and numbers and listening to his endless stream of 4-year-old observations about the world. Around midday, Jake came to find her. "Got a visitor, Mrs. Ashford, lady from Newton City." Nora's heart jumped. "Dr. Winters?" "No, ma'am. Says her name's Margaret Chen. Says she knows you." Margaret. The woman who'd set the fire that allowed Nora to escape. The woman Nora had never thought she'd see again. She rushed to the house to find a small woman with burn scars on her hands standing awkwardly in the parlor. "Margaret," Nora breathed. The woman turned, and her face broke into a smile. "Nora, you made it. You actually made it home." They embraced, both of them crying, and for several minutes neither could speak. Finally, Margaret pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I heard about what happened here. The confrontation with Braddock, the town rallying around you. I had to come see for myself." Margaret's voice was rough with emotion. "I didn't know if you'd survived the escape. I saw you run into the darkness, and then the guards caught me, and I thought they might have caught you too. They didn't. I made it. Because of you. Because you set that fire and gave me a chance." Nora gripped Margaret's hands. "How did you get out?" "The fire destroyed half the building, and the investigation that followed exposed everything. They couldn't keep any of us there after that. Not legally, anyway. I went back to my family. They believed me this time about what had happened, about why I'd been committed." Margaret's eyes hardened. "My husband tried to have me sent away again, but my brothers wouldn't let him. Turns out having 4 angry brothers who know the truth is pretty good protection. I'm so glad you're safe. And I'm glad you're home. But Nora, I didn't just come here to see you. I came because I heard Braddock is fighting back, trying to prove his commitment papers were legitimate. And I have information that might help your case." Nora gestured for Margaret to sit, her heart pounding. "What kind of information?" "I was at Riverside Haven longer than you, 7 years. And during that time, I kept notes, secret notes, hidden in my mattress, documenting everything. The other women who were committed illegally, the doctors who falsified reports, the forgers who created fake marriage certificates and death certificates and commitment papers. I even documented the payments. I worked in the laundry, and sometimes we'd find receipts in men's pockets before washing their clothes. I kept copies of everything. You still have these notes? I have them memorized. The papers themselves burned in the fire, but I wrote everything down again as soon as I was free. Margaret pulled a thick notebook from her bag. Everything's in here. Names, dates, amounts of money, including documentation of the $50,000 Lucian Braddock paid to have you committed and forcibly married. Nora stared at the notebook, hardly daring to believe it. Margaret, this could change everything. That's why I brought it. You saved my life by running when you did. If you hadn't escaped, if Braddock hadn't come looking for you, the investigation might never have happened. The fire exposed the asylum, but your case is going to expose the whole network of corruption. Doctors, lawyers, judges, all of them taking money to imprison innocent women. It's dangerous for you to testify. These are powerful men. I know, but I'm tired of being afraid. We all are. All the women who survived that place. We're ready to fight back. Margaret's voice was fierce, and we're ready to stand with you when you do. They spent the next hour going through Margaret's notes, and with each page, Nora felt the chains of the past 4 years loosening. This was the proof they needed. Not just testimony or suspicions, but documented evidence of the conspiracy that had stolen her life. When Reed returned that evening, Nora met him in the yard with Margaret's notebook in hand. "We have it," she said simply. "We have the proof we need." Reed looked at the notebook, then at Nora's face, and his expression transformed from exhaustion to hope. "Tell me." So she did. She introduced him to Margaret, showed him the documentation, explained how this evidence could unravel not just Lucien's claims, but the entire network of corruption that had enabled them. And with each word, Reed's determination hardened into something unbreakable. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take this to Judge Crane. We present everything, Margaret's testimony, the financial records, the statements from the townspeople, all of it. And we end this, once and for all." That night, Margaret stayed at the ranch, sharing a room with Nora. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of survival, of the other women they'd known, of the guards and doctors and nurses who'd been part of the machinery of oppression, and they talked about freedom, what it meant, how it felt, how precious it was now that they'd tasted it again. "Do you ever wonder if it's real?" Margaret asked in the darkness. "If you're really free, or if you'll wake up back in that room?" "Every morning," Nora admitted, "for the first few seconds when I wake up, I panic. Think I'm still there, but then I hear Caleb laughing or Reed moving around downstairs, and I remember, I'm home, I'm free, it's real." "I do the same thing, except I listen for my brothers arguing at breakfast, or my mother singing while she works. Small sounds that mean I'm really here." "Will you stay?" Nora asked. "After the trial, after everything's settled?" "I don't know. I'm not sure where I belong anymore. 7 years in that place, it changes you. I don't fit back into my old life, but I don't know what my new life looks like yet." "You could stay here," Nora offered. "The ranch always needs help, and I could use a friend who understands. Who knows what it was like?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. Let me think about it." But Nora could hear the hope in her voice, and she knew that Margaret was already imagining it, a new life, a fresh start, a place where the past couldn't reach her, just like Nora had imagined for herself. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the first real bite of winter in the air. Reed, Nora, and Margaret rode to town together, Jake following with a wagon full of documentation. By the time they reached the courthouse, a crowd had already gathered. Word had spread that there would be a major development in the Ashford case, and it seemed like half the territory had turned out to watch. Judge Crane met them in his chambers, his expression grave. "I've heard you have new evidence, Mr. Ashford." "We do, Your Honor." Reed laid Margaret's notebook on the desk, along with the other documentation they'd gathered. "This is Margaret Chen. She was held at Riverside Haven for 7 years and kept detailed records of the illegal activities there, including documentation of Lucian Braddock's payments to have my wife illegally committed and forcibly married." The judge spent the next hour reviewing the evidence, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up at Margaret. "Ms. Chen, are you prepared to testify to all of this under oath?" "I am, Your Honor." "And you understand that you'll be accusing some very powerful men of very serious crimes?" "I understand, and I'm not afraid anymore." Judge Crane nodded slowly, then looked at Nora. Mrs. Ashford, I owe you an apology. When I first reviewed Mr. Braddock's papers, they appeared legitimate. I should have investigated more thoroughly before making any determinations. You're investigating now, Nora said. That's what matters. Indeed I am. And based on this evidence, I'm prepared to rule that the commitment papers were fraudulent, the marriage certificate was forged, and Lucian Braddock has committed multiple crimes including kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He stood, his voice taking on the formal tones of legal authority. I'm issuing a warrant for his immediate arrest, and I'm nullifying any and all legal claims he has made regarding you, Mrs. Ashford. You are and have always been legally married to Reed Ashford. Your commitment to Riverside Haven was illegal, and your freedom is hereby permanently established under territorial law. Nora felt Reed's arm around her waist, supporting her as the full weight of the judge's words sank in. It was over. After 4 years of imprisonment and weeks of fighting, it was finally over. Thank you, Your Honor, she whispered. Don't thank me. Thank Ms. Chen for her bravery and Mr. Ashford for his determination. Judge Crane pulled out a pocket watch. Now I believe there's a crowd outside waiting to hear my ruling. Shall we go tell them? They stepped out onto the courthouse steps, and the crowd fell silent. Judge Crane read his ruling in a clear, carrying voice that reached every corner of the gathered assembly. And when he finished, when he declared Nora legally free and Lucian Braddock a criminal, the crowd erupted in cheers. Nora stood there, holding Reed's hand, watching the faces of the townspeople who'd come to support her. She saw Mrs. Henderson crying happy tears. She saw Pastor Williams nodding with satisfaction. She saw young Sarah Mitchell beaming with pride. And she saw Caleb, held in Jake's arms at the edge of the crowd, waving at her with his whole body. "Mama!" he called out. "Mama, you won!" And she had. Not just the legal battle, but the bigger fight. The fight to reclaim her life, her family, her freedom. She'd won it all. As the crowd began to disperse, a commotion erupted near the jail. Lucien was being led out in chains, his face twisted with rage, his expensive suit rumpled and dirty. He saw Nora on the courthouse steps and screamed at her. "This isn't over. You think you've won? But I'll appeal. I'll take this to every court in the territory. I'll never stop." "Yes, you will," Judge Crane said coldly. "Because I'm remanding you to territorial custody to await trial on multiple felony charges. You won't be threatening Mrs. Ashford or anyone else for a very long time." As Lucien was dragged away, still shouting threats, Nora felt the last chains of fear fall away. He was just a man now, a criminal facing justice, nothing more. He had no power over her anymore. Reed pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, feeling 4 years of tension finally release. They stood there on the courthouse steps while the crowd celebrated around them, just holding each other, two people who'd been torn apart and fought their way back together. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's really over," Reed confirmed. "You're free. You're home. You're mine. And nothing's ever going to take you away again." Caleb squirmed out of Jake's arms and ran to them, wrapping himself around both their legs. "Can we go home now?" he asked. "Can Mama come home for real?" "Yes, sweetheart," Nora said, picking him up, even though he was getting almost too big for it. "Mama's coming home for real. Forever." And as they walked back to the wagon, past the celebrating townspeople and the freed women from Riverside Haven who'd come to witness Lucian's arrest, Nora felt something she hadn't felt in 4 long years, complete and total peace. She was home. She was free. She was with her family, and she was never, ever letting go again. The wagon ride back to the ranch felt different from any journey Nora had taken in the past weeks. This time, there was no fear shadowing her, no dread of what might come next, no constant looking over her shoulder to see if Lucian's men were following. This time, she sat between Reed and Caleb, Margaret beside them, and watched the prairie roll by with nothing but gratitude in her heart. Caleb had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from the excitement of the day, and Nora held him close, breathing in the little boy's smell of him, dirt and sunshine and innocence. Reed's hand rested on her knee, his thumb tracing small circles through the fabric of her dress, a constant reassurance that she was real, she was here, she was his. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. "I'm thinking about all the nights I spent in that room, imagining this exact moment, coming home with you, holding our son, knowing I was finally free. I imagined it so many times it started to feel like a story I was telling myself, something beautiful but impossible. She looked at him, tears pricking her eyes. But it's real. It actually happened. It happened because you made it happen, because you never gave up. We made it happen, Nora corrected. You believed me when no one else did. You went to Newton City and found proof. You stood beside me when it would have been easier to let me go. Reed's hand tightened on her knee. Letting you go was never an option. Not 4 years ago when I thought I'd lost you, and definitely not now that I know the truth. You're stuck with me, Nora Ashford, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part. We said those words once already, and I plan to say them again, in front of everyone, as soon as Pastor Williams can arrange it. Reed glanced at Margaret, who was watching the landscape with distant eyes. You'll stay for the wedding, won't you, Ms. Chen? Margaret blinked, pulling herself back from wherever her thoughts had taken her. If you'll have me, I don't want to impose. It's not imposing, Nora said firmly. You're the reason I'm free. The reason all those women are free. You're not just welcome, Margaret. You're family now. The words seemed to strike Margaret deeply. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly, but not before Nora saw the naked longing on her face. 7 years stolen from her life. 7 years of isolation and fear and abuse. She needed family, maybe even more than Nora did. When they arrived at the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Jake was waiting in the yard, and his weathered face broke into a rare smile when he saw them. It's really done then, he asked as Reed helped Nora down from the wagon, Caleb still sleeping in her arms. It's really done. Braddock's in custody, the papers are nullified, and Nora's officially free. Reed's voice carried a satisfaction that Nora hadn't heard in years. We won, Jake. About damn time. Jake nodded to Margaret. Ma'am, you planning to stay on? For a while, if that's all right. More than all right. We could use the help, and Jake paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. My sister went through something similar, different circumstances, but the same kind of prison. Took her a long time to feel safe again. So if you need anything at all, you just say the word. Margaret's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. Thank you. That means more than you know. That evening, after Caleb had been fed and bathed and tucked into bed with a story, after Margaret had been settled in the spare room with fresh linens and a warm fire, Reed and Nora finally had a moment alone. They sat on the porch in the growing darkness, wrapped in a shared blanket against the November chill, watching the first stars emerge. Tell me what you want, Reed said quietly. For the wedding, for the ranch, for our life. Tell me what you dreamed about during those 4 years. Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, thinking. I dreamed about the small things mostly. Waking up next to you. Making breakfast for our family, working in the garden, teaching Caleb to read. Nothing grand or exciting, just life. Normal, everyday life. That's what we'll have then. Normal and everyday and perfect. What about you? What do you want? Reed was quiet for a long moment. I want to watch you smile without seeing shadows in your eyes. I want to hear you laugh without wondering if you're remembering pain. I want to go to sleep every night knowing you're safe in our bed, and wake up every morning seeing you there beside me. His voice roughened. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the 4 years you lost, and I want to grow old with you, Nora. I want to see Caleb grow up, maybe give him brothers and sisters if you're willing. I want grandchildren someday. I want a whole lifetime of everyday moments that you dreamed about in that cell. Brothers and sisters, Nora repeated softly. She'd thought about it during her imprisonment, thought about the children she'd never have, the family she'd never build. I'd like that. When I'm ready. When the nightmares stop and I can sleep through the night without waking up convinced I'm back in that room. However long that takes, Reed promised. We have time now, all the time in the world. They sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. The house felt different now, not just a structure of wood and nails, but a home. Their home. Nora moved through it with a sense of ownership and peace she'd never felt before, not even in those early days of marriage before everything had been stolen. That night, for the first time in 4 years, Nora slept in her own bed. Reed held her close, his steady breathing and warm presence a shield against the nightmares that still sometimes came. When she woke in the small hours of the morning, momentarily disoriented and afraid, he was there to whisper, "You're home. You're safe. I've got you." And she'd fall back asleep, believing it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and healing. Margaret proved to be a godsend around the ranch, throwing herself into work with the same fierce determination that had helped her survive 7 years of imprisonment. She and Nora formed a bond that went deeper than friendship. Two women who'd survived the same hell, who understood each other's nightmares and triggers without needing to explain. The trial preparations began in earnest. Lucien's lawyers tried every legal maneuver they could think of, but the evidence was too damning. More women came forward, emboldened by Nora's victory, each with their own story of false commitment and abuse. The scandal grew until it reached beyond the territory, making headlines in newspapers across the country. Riverside Haven was permanently shut down, its directors arrested, and a full investigation was launched into the network of corrupt doctors and judges who'd enabled the atrocities. Pastor Williams arranged the vow renewal ceremony for the first Saturday in December, giving Nora time to prepare and the town time to help. The women of Ashford Hollow descended on the ranch with fabric and thread, determined to make Nora a proper wedding dress. This time, there would be no torn silk or ruined lace. This time, everything would be perfect. Mrs. Henderson took charge of the dressmaking with the authority of a general directing troops. "Not white," she declared. "White is for first-time brides. You're a woman who's been married, had a child, survived hell, and come back stronger. You need a dress that reflects that." They settled on a deep blue silk that matched Reed's eyes, with delicate silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar. The dress was simple but elegant, the kind of thing a woman could wear again for special occasions, not just hang in a wardrobe as a memory. Nora stood for countless fittings, feeling awed about the fuss, but also touched by it. These women were trying to give her back something that had been stolen. Not just a wedding, but a celebration, a public declaration of her place in this community. "You know, this is as much for them as it is for you," Margaret observed one afternoon when they finally had a break from the sewing circle. "They feel guilty for not believing you at first. This is their way of making amends." "I know, and I'm grateful even if it feels like too much sometimes." "It's not too much. You deserve this, Nora. You deserve to be celebrated." Margaret's voice turned wistful. "I never had a wedding. My family arranged my marriage, but before it could happen, my fiancé's family had me committed. Said I was too educated, too outspoken, that I'd make an unsuitable wife. By the time I got out, I was too old to be marriageable by society's standards. So let me live vicariously through you, all right?" Nora hugged her friend. "You're not too old for anything. You're 32, Margaret. You have your whole life ahead of you." "Maybe. But right now I'm just trying to remember how to live without looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. I understand that feeling. I know you do. That's why I can talk to you about it." Margaret pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Do you ever wonder what you would have been like if none of this had happened? If you'd gotten to be just a normal wife and mother for the past 4 years? Sometimes. But then I think, would I appreciate it the same way? Would I treasure every ordinary moment if I hadn't had it all ripped away?" Nora shook her head. "I'm not glad it happened. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I can't regret who it's made me. I'm stronger now, fiercer, more certain about what matters." "What does matter?" "This." Nora gestured around the ranch, at Caleb playing in the yard, at Reed working with the horses, at the home they'd built together. Family, love, freedom. Everything else is just noise. The week before the wedding, Reed took Nora and Caleb into town for supplies. The whole territory seemed to be planning to attend the ceremony, and they needed enough food and drink to host what was shaping up to be a massive celebration. As they walked down Main Street, Nora noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. The building that had once housed her father's office, the place where he'd gambled away their family's dignity and ultimately sold his daughter, had been converted into something new. A sign hung over the door: Haven House, shelter and support for women in need. Dr. Sarah Winters stood in front of the building directing workers who were carrying in furniture and supplies. She saw Nora and waved her over. "What do you think?" Dr. Winters asked, gesturing to the sign. We're opening next week. A place where women can come if they're fleeing abusive situations, if they need medical care they can't afford, if they're trying to rebuild their lives after trauma. Judge Crane helped secure the funding, and several families in town have pledged ongoing support. It's wonderful, Nora said, feeling tears prick her eyes. But why here? Why my father's old office? Because of you, Dr. Winters said simply. Your story inspired people, made them realize how many women suffer in silence, how many need help but have nowhere to turn. We wanted to turn a place of betrayal and corruption into a place of healing and hope. Seemed fitting. Nora looked at the building, at the place where her father had made the deal that destroyed her life, and felt something shift inside her. The past didn't have to define the future. Pain could be transformed into purpose. Loss could become legacy. Can I help? She asked. With the shelter. I don't have much to offer, but I could volunteer, or... You've already helped more than you know, Dr. Winters interrupted. But yes, if you want to volunteer once you're settled, we'd be honored to have you. Women who've survived what you've survived. They need to see that recovery is possible, that life can be beautiful again. As they walked back to the wagon, Caleb between them holding both their hands, Reed said quietly, You don't have to do that, you know. Volunteer at the shelter. Nah. You've been through enough. You don't owe anyone anything. I know I don't have to, but I want to. Those women, they're me, Reed. They're me 4 months ago, or 4 years ago, or 4 days after I escaped. If I can help even one of them find their way home like I did, then everything I went through will mean something more than just my own suffering. Reed stopped walking and pulled her into a kiss, right there in the middle of Main Street with half the town watching. When he finally released her, his eyes were bright with emotion. Have I told you lately that you're the strongest person I know? You might have mentioned it once or twice. Well, I'm mentioning it again. You're incredible, Nora Ashford. Caleb tugged on their hands, impatient with the adult conversation. Can we get candy now? Mrs. Henderson said if I was good, I could have peppermint sticks. They laughed and continued down the street, just a family doing ordinary errands on an ordinary day. And Nora realized that was exactly what she'd dreamed about in that cell. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but this. The simple, profound joy of being with the people she loved, doing mundane things, living a life that was finally, truly hers. The night before the wedding, Nora couldn't sleep. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Reed, and made her way downstairs. To her surprise, she found Margaret sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring out the window at the moonlit prairie. Can't sleep either? Nora asked, pouring herself tea. Too many thoughts. Margaret smiled ruefully. I've been thinking about tomorrow, about you and Reed renewing your vows. And I realized something. What's that? You're not just reclaiming your marriage, you're reclaiming yourself. The woman you would have been if none of this had happened, mixed with the woman you've become because of what happened. That's powerful, Nora. That's transformation. Nora sat down across from her friend. Is that what you're trying to do? Transform? I'm trying to figure out who I am now that I'm not defined by that place anymore. For 7 years, I was the crazy woman in room 12. Before that, I was the girl who's too educated for her own good. But who am I really? What do I want? Where do I belong? Margaret's voice cracked. I don't know the answers, and it terrifies me. You belong here for as long as you want to stay. And as for who you are, you're the woman who kept records for 7 years because she believed in truth and justice. You're the woman who set a fire to free not just yourself but everyone in that building. You're brave and smart and strong, Margaret. That's who you are. I'm also broken. I wake up screaming some nights. I can't stand to have doors locked. I panic when men stand too close. How do I build a life when I'm still so damaged? The same way I'm building mine, Nora said gently. One day at a time. One moment at a time. And with people around you who understand and don't judge. The damage doesn't define you, Margaret. How you move forward despite the damage. That's what defines you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two survivors finding solace in shared understanding. Finally, Margaret said, I think I want to help with the shelter. Dr. Winters asked me, and I wasn't sure, but I think I need to. Need to turn what happened to me into something that helps others. Then you should do it. What if I'm not strong enough? You're sitting here, aren't you? Free and alive and planning a future. That's strength, Margaret. That's more strength than most people will ever need to have. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear, with frost sparkling on the prairie grass like diamonds. Nora woke to find Reed already up, standing at the window watching the sunrise. "Second thoughts?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Not even one." He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "I've been thinking about the first time we got married, 5 years ago. I was so nervous I dropped the ring twice during the ceremony. Do you remember?" "I remember. Pastor Williams had to wait while you crawled around on the floor looking for it. I was terrified I wasn't good enough for you, that I couldn't give you the life you deserved, that I'd disappoint you somehow." Reed's voice was steady now, certain. "I'm not nervous today, because I know what we can survive together. I know what you're made of, and you know what I'm made of. We've been tested by fire, Nora, and we came through it stronger. So no, I'm not nervous. I'm just ready to promise you forever, knowing what forever really means." Nora felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you. I loved you 5 years ago. I loved you through 4 years of hell, and I'll love you for every day we have left." "Then let's go promise that in front of everyone." The ceremony was set for noon, to be held on the ranch with the prairie as their cathedral and the sky as their ceiling. As the morning progressed, wagons and horses began arriving, bringing what looked like the entire territory. People set up tables for the reception feast. Children ran and played in the yard, and someone had strung up lanterns for when the celebration stretched into evening. Mrs. Henderson and Sarah Mitchell helped Nora dress, their hands gentle as they fastened buttons and arranged her hair. The blue silk dress fit perfectly, and when Nora looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the half-starved, terrified creature who'd stepped off the stagecoach 6 weeks ago. This was a woman who'd fought her way home and won. A woman who'd reclaimed her life, her family, her future. "You're beautiful," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice thick with emotion. "Reed's going to forget how to speak when he sees you." "Let's hope he remembers his vows, at least," Nora said with a shaky laugh. Caleb appeared in the doorway, dressed in his best clothes with his hair slicked down. "Mama, everyone's waiting. Papa says to tell you he's ready whenever you are, but he hopes it's soon because he might die from waiting." The women laughed, and Nora held out her hand to her son. "Well, we can't let Papa die. Come on, sweetheart, walk me out." "Can I really?" "Really? You're the most important person in both our lives. Of course you're walking me out." They made their way downstairs and out to the yard, where chairs had been set up in rows facing a simple wooden arch that Jake and the ranch hands had built. Reed stood under the arch with Pastor Williams, and when he saw Nora approaching on Caleb's arm, his face transformed. Mrs. Henderson was right. He looked like he'd forgotten every word he'd ever known. Nora walked slowly through the assembled crowd, seeing familiar faces everywhere. There was Judge Crane, who'd ultimately believed her and fought for justice. There was Dr. Winters, who'd provided the medical testimony that had helped free her. There were the townspeople who'd brought food and supplies and support. There were the women from Riverside Haven who'd come forward to testify, each of them a living testament to survival and courage. And there, at the front, was Reed, her husband, her partner, her love. When she reached the arch, Caleb very seriously placed Nora's hand in Reed's, then stepped back to stand with Jake, looking proud enough to burst. Pastor Williams smiled at them both. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness something remarkable. Not a beginning, but a continuation. Not a first promise, but a renewal of promises already made and tested by fire. Reed and Nora Ashford have been married for 5 years, but for 4 of those years they were separated by forces of corruption and cruelty. Yet their love survived, their commitment endured, and today they stand before us to declare again what their hearts have never stopped believing, that they belong together, now and always." Reed's hands trembled slightly as he held Nora's, and she squeezed gently, giving him her strength. He cleared his throat and began the vows they'd written together. "Nora, 5 years ago I promised to love you in sickness and health, for better or worse. I thought I understood what those words meant. I didn't. Not really. Not until I lost you and spent 4 years learning what worse really means. Not until I saw you fight your way back to us and understood what strength really looks like. His voice cracked. You are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable person I've ever known. And I promise you now, not just to love you, but to cherish every moment we have. To never take a single day for granted. To build a life with you that honors everything you survived to come home to. I promise to be worthy of the fight you fought. And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret coming back. Nora could barely see him through her tears, but she blinked them away, needing to see his face as she spoke her own vows. Reed, when I was locked away, I used to imagine this moment, but I never imagined it would feel like this. Like coming home to a place I've never been before. You believed me when it would have been easier not to. You fought for me when you could have let me go. You kept our son safe and loved and whole while I was gone. You're not just my husband, Reed. You're my hero, my home, my everything. She took a shaky breath. I promise to wake up every morning grateful for another day with you. I promise to be the wife you deserve and the mother Caleb needs. I promise to build a life with you that's bigger and better and more beautiful than anything either of us dreamed. And I promise that no matter what comes, no matter what trials or troubles or pain, I will never, ever give up on us again. Pastor Williams had to wipe his own eyes before he could continue. The rings, please. Jake stepped forward with a small box. Inside were 2 simple gold bands, not the original rings from their first wedding, which had been lost long ago, but new ones that Reed had commissioned from the town jeweler. Inside Nora's band was an inscription, Home at Last. Inside Reed's, Worth the wait. They exchanged rings with shaking hands, and Pastor Williams said, By the power vested in me by God in this territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, still, forever. Reed, you may kiss your bride. Reed pulled Nora close and kissed her as if they had all the time in the world, as if they'd never been separated, as if the past 4 years had been just a bad dream. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and when they finally broke apart, Caleb was there, wrapping himself around both their legs. Are we a forever family now? He asked. We always were, buddy, Reed said, picking him up. But yeah, forever family. Nothing's ever going to change that. The reception was everything a wedding celebration should be, food and music and laughter and joy. People danced on the makeshift floor that had been set up in the yard, children played games in the fading light, and as the sun set, the lanterns were lit, turning the ranch into something magical. Nora danced with Reed, with Caleb, with Jake, with Margaret, with what felt like half the territory. Her feet hurt, and her face ached from smiling, but she'd never been happier. This was what she'd survived for, this moment, this celebration, this absolute and perfect joy. As the evening wore on and the crowd began to thin, Margaret found Nora by the corral, watching the horses move in the moonlight. I've made a decision, Margaret said without preamble. I'm staying here on the ranch, if you'll have me, and I'm going to help with the shelter. Dr. Winters says they need someone to run it, someone who understands what those women are going through. I think I can do that. I know you can do that, Nora said, hugging her friend. And of course you can stay. This place, it's not just Reed's ranch anymore. It's a home for people who need one. That includes you for as long as you want. Thank you. Margaret's voice was thick with emotion. For everything. For showing me that survival isn't enough, that we can actually live again, not just exist. We'll figure it out together, Nora promised. All of us. One day at a time. Later, after the last guests had departed and the ranch had fallen quiet, Reed and Nora stood on their porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Caleb was asleep upstairs, Margaret was in her room, and the whole ranch seemed to be holding its breath in contentment. Tell me what you're thinking, Reed said, his arms around her waist. I'm thinking about how far we've come. 6 weeks ago, I stepped off that stagecoach with nothing but hope and a ruined wedding dress. And now, she gestured to the ranch, to the house, to everything they'd built and rebuilt and claimed as theirs. Now I have everything. Not everything, not yet. Reed turned her to face him. I want to give you more. More children, more years, more happiness than you can count. I want to wake up beside you for the next 50 years and still be amazed that you're here. I want to watch Caleb grow up and have children of his own. I want to build something so strong and beautiful that what happened to you becomes just one chapter in a much bigger story." "It already is," Nora said softly. "The worst thing that ever happened to me led me here, to this moment, to this life. I'm not grateful for the pain, Reed, but I'm grateful for what it taught me, about strength, about love, about what really matters. What really matters. This." She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You, Caleb, family, home, everything else is just details." Reed kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Nora Ashford. I loved you before, I loved you during, and I'll love you after. Whatever comes next, we face it together." "Together," Nora agreed. They stood there for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead, feeling the prairie wind carry the scent of winter and possibility. Somewhere out there, Lucian Braddock was in prison, facing justice for his crimes. Somewhere, the investigation was continuing, finding more victims, exposing more corruption, bringing more light to places that had thrived in darkness. But here, on this ranch, in this moment, Nora Ashford was simply home. She was loved, she was free, and she was exactly where she belonged. The next morning, Nora woke slowly, savoring the warmth of Reed beside her and the knowledge that she could stay here as long as she wanted. No locks, no bars, no guards, just freedom and family and the rest of her life stretching out before her like the prairie, vast and beautiful and full of possibility. She heard Caleb's footsteps in the hall and smiled. Any moment now he'd burst through the door, demanding breakfast or wanting to show them something he'd found or just needing the reassurance that they were both still there. The door opened, and Caleb peeked in, his hair sticking up at impossible angles. "Mama? Papa? Are you awake?" "We're awake, buddy," Reed said, his voice rough with sleep. "Come here." Caleb scrambled onto the bed, wedging himself between them, and Nora wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the little boy's smell of him. This was everything. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" Caleb asked. "The kind with berries?" "We can have anything you want," Nora promised. "And can Margaret help? She's funny when she makes pancakes. She flips them really high." "I'm sure Margaret would love to help." They went downstairs together, the three of them, and found Margaret already in the kitchen, starting the fire in the stove. She looked up when they entered, and for just a moment Nora saw the fear and uncertainty that still lingered in her friend's eyes. But then Caleb ran to her, chattering about pancakes, and Margaret's face softened into a smile. This was healing, Nora thought. Not dramatic or sudden, but slow and steady and real. This was what recovery looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the choice to live despite it. To wake up each day and choose joy, choose family, choose to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been destroyed. As the morning progressed and the ranch came alive with the sounds of work and life and normalcy, Nora stood at the window of her kitchen, in her house, on her ranch, with her family, and let herself believe it was real. All of it. The freedom, the love, the future that stretched out before her like an unwritten book. She'd survived the grave they'd tried to bury her in. She'd clawed her way back to the light, and now, finally, she was going to live. Really, truly live. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Nora threw herself into ranch work, into mothering Caleb, into supporting Margaret as she prepared to run Haven House. She volunteered at the shelter twice a week, talking with women who were fleeing abuse, who were trying to rebuild their lives, who needed to see that survival was possible. Each woman's story was different, but Nora heard echoes of her own in all of them. The fear, the shame, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, life could be good again, and she was able to tell them, with absolute certainty, that it could, that it would, that the darkness didn't last forever. Reed expanded the ranch, buying more land, hiring more hands. He was building something permanent now, something that would last for generations. A legacy for Caleb and whatever other children they might have. A place where family mattered more than money, where people were valued for their character rather than their connections. Caleb thrived, growing taller and stronger by the day. He had Reed's temperament and Nora's eyes, and he was fearless in the way only children who are deeply loved can be. He called Margaret Aunt Margaret, without anyone suggesting it, and she wore the title like armor, like proof that she was more than her trauma, more than her past. 6 months after the wedding, on a warm spring evening with the prairie in bloom, Nora stood in the garden planting vegetables for the summer harvest. Her hands were dirty, her dress was stained, and she'd never been happier. This was what she'd dreamed about in that cell. The simple, profound joy of working her own land, growing food for her own family, living a life that was completely, utterly, perfectly hers. Reed found her there as the sun was setting, Caleb asleep on his shoulder after a long day of playing. He watched her work for a moment, and when she looked up, his expression was so full of love it took her breath away. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing. Everything." He shifted Caleb's weight carefully. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how close I came to losing you forever, how grateful I am that you're here. I'm not going anywhere," Nora promised, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "You're stuck with me, Reed Ashford, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part. Best promise anyone ever made me." They walked back to the house together as the stars began to emerge one by one, painting the sky with light. Inside, Margaret had supper waiting, and the house smelled like home, like bread and roasted vegetables and coffee and everything good and warm and safe. This was the life Nora had fought for. This was the family she'd refused to give up on. This was the freedom she'd clawed her way through hell to claim. And it was worth it. Every moment of pain, every night of fear, every desperate prayer in that locked room, it was all worth it for this. For love. For family. For home. For the life she'd been denied but never stopped believing in. For the woman who'd returned from the grave and learned to live again. For forever. And forever, Nora thought, as she sat down to dinner with her husband, her son, and her friend, was exactly as long as she planned to keep fighting for this happiness. Every single day, for the rest of her life. The end.